All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to my channel again. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, that share button. Feel free to email me with any questions, comments, words of wisdom, criticisms. Everyone who's subscribed, I appreciate you coming through. I know it's been a very busy, year, but particularly very busy 24 hours. And I appreciate you stopping through. Whether you're here during the live stream or you come back when it's pre-recorded, when it's done recording. I want to hear your feedback on this topic. Shout out to the Nameless Protagonist. I will be doing this stream with him today. I hope everybody out there is doing all right. We don't really know who the president is right now, but we got to keep it rolling, keep it moving. I know they're having some issues with Pennsylvania, with Georgia, especially with Fulton County, Douglas County, Calhoun, Forsyth, Clayton, Clayco. A lot of those other counties, we pretty much know. I've lived in Douglas. I've lived in Fulton County. And so you kind of understand, like, it's even with that, even with a traditionally red area, it can flip to be blue. And I think that's what we're seeing in certain places. Good evening, Asha Walker and Commander Gore. How y'all doing? Oh, his Nameless. What's going on, Nameless? How are you doing this evening? I think you're on mute right now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me all right?
1 second. I think I can now. All right. Salute. What's going on, Nicole?
Hey, nothing much. What's going on with you?
Oh, man, just watching the dumpster fire.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a website with different t-shirts on it. I have one that is it has a stormtrooper crying and the Death Star is blowing up.
Oh, God.
And he's saying, I had friends on that Death Star. It's so funny, like really sarcastic shirts. One of them is a dumpster with 2020 on it, and it's on fire. So it is this year right here, right now. I think it's $6 shirts. I think that's the name, $6shirts.com, I think. But yeah, this
funny.
is the best, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I have I was looking at my, let me stop sharing for a minute. I was looking at the
map
slides to make sure that my slides were like that, it was aligned properly earlier.
Got you.
Yeah, because even if I come out of the full screen, I still need to make sure that it's lined up. But yeah, I was looking at the map. What do you think?
I mean, I'm surprised. So there was somebody that hopped on earlier and kind of clarified what was going on, because it looks so different last night to now. There was a massive change in votes, and what it was is, I guess they were waiting to count the early votes until everything closed, so that people didn't get misinformation on the actual scope of the way the election's going, because folks apparently don't read. So they were worried that if people saw a particular candidate was ahead, that people would be discouraged from voting on the voting day.
Right.
So we just got a whole bunch of the early vote to kick in, and it changed really critical places such as Wisconsin and in Michigan, and especially in places like Flint and Detroit. Like, those places at first were pretty red, and then those extra votes kicked in, and yeah, they're sitting at 99% done. They're pretty sure Michigan, that's Trump. Wisconsin, that's Trump. The only thing we're waiting on right now is Nevada, really. And it's just 2 districts. Let me see where they're at. So they've got 75% done. I don't know what's happening in Nevada right now, but they've been stuck at this point for a while. And it's close enough to where even though Biden's in the lead there, if he loses Nevada, Trump wins.
Yeah, I was looking at that. See, they were because of the electoral votes, and they were saying that about what was it? Was it Florida or Texas? It was
Florida.
another where they were mentioning that. I mean, Florida, they were just avoiding like the plague last night. It was crazy. I was like, what is wrong with you guys? Just do your job. Do your freaking job. And they were like, oh, let's talk to some Latino voters in Florida. In South Florida, how was it for you? Just show the number. Just show the map. Just call it. But they no.
You know what it is?
See.
There's more people that went Republican this time than they expected.
I think so.
A lot more, especially with the Hispanic vote. Like, they think everybody in Florida's Cuban. I don't know why.
They kept saying that too.
Oh my God.
Every time they got corrected, they brought another Latino on to say something again. I was like, whoa, what are you guys doing?
Right.
Your racism is showing just a little. Your slip is showing, man. Come on.
I mean, they had Marco Rubio, so that's what they think when they think Cuba at this point. So, but no, they're really out of touch. Like, they look at left and BLM as being this giant monolithic thing. And they ignore the fact that folks like this space exist, that present a counter narrative to a lot of that stuff and are not remotely interested. So when you say BLM, because everybody's been running around on like Twitter and Facebook, just rocking the hashtag nonchalantly, I could see how they get that idea, which tells me they see the propaganda, but they don't talk to nobody, which is normal.
Yeah. Absorption without filtration. So,
Yep.
They absorb everything, the information given to them. They don't question the source. They don't filter out anything. They don't know what to filter out. What's going on, Mike B? Yeah, you're right. And I think that you have a point when you're saying that they didn't expect a lot of people to vote Republican this time. And I think that's true, but also that is absolutely true. And there are a lot of people I think that did not vote 2016 for whatever reason, or maybe they were independent, or Dana Bash said something earlier on CNN where my mom heard it, and then I talked to her later on, like hours later. I've seen what she said. But she's an analyst, commentator on CNN. What's going on, Mike V and Rael, Commander Gore? I want to just say what's up to y'all again. She was like, you can't assume that somebody's registered as Democrat that they're gonna just vote down ballot Democrat.
And here's a list of exit poll. Here's a list of exit poll content that speaks to exactly what you just said. I think this will be useful for everybody to look at. It showed how just because people were registered as a particular orientation and they used the classic Democrat, Republican, and other, and then they also went liberal, moderate, and conservative. And they showed how, there was some stark contrast where there's people who were moderate that, they went real heavy Democrat. But when you compare that to previous years, they were way more conservative this year than last year.
Right.
And there's a movement among conservatives or rather the other way around. There's a movement among liberals to become a little bit more conservative. So it's pretty interesting. Just, looking at the breakdowns of the demographics, they show the percentage of black men who voted, the percentage of white folks that voted, which I think is worth looking at. I think the lowest percentage of a demographic that was present in the voting scheme this year were black men, which is getting everybody's attention. because not only is it that, you have a 18% Republican presence there and an 80% Democratic presence, which means there's a 2% that simply didn't go demographic or Democratic.
Right.
And it's a real serious uptrend from the previous election where I think it was something like 12% of Black men went conservative. So, there's a movement that's clearly split amongst gender in the Black community.
Yeah, that's significant. And they know it's there. They recognize that it is Black men are an ignored class of your own in their mind, and they don't even mention it. I'm waiting for someone to mention it. A Black man literally on TV, and he's not mentioning it. He mentions everyone around the crust. Nobody wants the crust of a freaking pie. You want to eat the pie. If you want to have, Mike B, you mentioned this once, if he's still in the chat, you're just continuing to ignore a demographic that has so much potential, and continuing to ignore the Black men as a demographic, not just for voting, for labor, for national security. Like, what are you going to do like in the future? Because you have this, you can't assume that white men are sewed up. Like, oh, they're just, this is what they're going to do. We're seeing that there's trends that are shifting with them. They're not even mentioning Black men. When I look from channel to channel, I'm looking at different channels. I'm looking at, on television. I'm looking online. I'm like, well, where are they? It's like, we're not going to talk about you guys like at all. Black women are on television, and they're bringing up Black women, which is silly, and everyone around the table looks at them crazy for saying that. But when you are dealing with elections, you're dealing with demographics, you're dealing with the effects of an election, you want to really look at the margins. Like you said, that's a significant increase statistically, 12 to 20%. There's a significant difference between the number you gave. I mean, the 2% is not significant. There's not a significant difference there at 20 versus 18, right?
Right.
It tells you that they're on the verge to widen that gap.
Yeah, potential demographic shift.
Right. If they continue to do what they're doing now and stay on this continuum, which is they haven't recognized that in doing that and continuing to do what they've been doing, it's not in their favor. They don't understand that just yet. But hey, it is what it is. People don't read, and like I said, people don't filter. They don't filter out a lot of the BS.
Oh, I mean, in their defense, well, not so much a defense, just for completion's sake. If they don't have a reason to know, oftentimes they're not going to try. And I think it's important when we look at our numbers in aggregate. So when you aggregate our votes together, you get 12% of us as an aggregate went Republican, whereas 87% of us went Democrat. So, like, when we look at that relative to any other group of people, we're still Old Faithful.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's very important, because when you compare that to what it actually broke down with our demographic, where, something like 9% of Black women went conservative, but then 20% basically, of men went conservative, and it's growing. These are things you need to pay attention to, whereas everybody else is following a pretty balanced ratio.
Yeah. And see, another thing is because we were trying to figure out, why are these voting trends changing so drastically? And I was like, this is not a drastic change. It's just no one ever really, like you said, no one took the time really to see these trends, like these gaps widening. It starts as a small crevice, and then it just starts to widen and widen over time. So, for instance, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, certain areas of Texas, you have a lot of people who have left California, as an example. And they're, they're going to other places. My mother herself has students from California. And this is not because of COVID. This occurred last year or the past couple of years, due to the cost of living. They're living in South Carolina, and they're loving it because they're spending so little money to live. The cost of living is so low. Do they bring their liberal ideologies, assumed liberal ideology and political views with them, or do they adjust and adapt to their environment? Not that quickly, but it does open their eyes to different perspective, because they're going from perhaps Southern California to South Carolina.
Right.
Ooh,
And like I
ooh.
look at Texas, for example, every major city is blue, with the exception of Fort Worth.
Hmm.
And it's kind of split down the middle between Fort Worth and Dallas. To me, it's the same city, but folks down here be ready to fight you if you say that.
Oh, wow.
So, but it's just interesting. I learned a lot about demographics following this election. In the past few days, I've learned a lot about where we are as Black people in general, and then where Black men tend to aggregate towards, and where we're working towards, and the implications of that in the future as far as affecting local and state policy. Because I think that's a direction we're ultimately going to have to start heading towards and looking at anyway. So
yeah, I know that you're right. Like a lot of people don't think that it's going to head that way, but it absolutely, needs to head that way if we're, I'm not a political analyst or anything, but I can see, I can see the BS. I can see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Anyone can do that. And the point of making it simple for everyone, for you to obtain a bigger aggregate of people who understand it, then move to the next level and move to the next level, makes more sense. A lot of the information that I have observed about politics for years has been so convoluted, and I'm like, why are you making it so complicated? Earlier we were I was having discussion, arguing back and forth, and I was like, Jason, let me just call my mom and you can talk to her, because he was like, why they didn't vote for Jamie? I was like, I said, honey, you don't know how South works, okay? I was like, you don't know. I said, first thing, you walk in somebody's house, they don't know you. If you from the South and you in the chat, you already know what I'm gonna say. You walk in somebody's house, they don't know you. The oldest person probably gonna say, whose child is this, something like that. Who is your people? Who are your people? Where are you from? They don't even care what you do. If they know your people, then that tells them everything they need to know about you. And because it's like, you look like so and so, like Nameless, you look like the Chapmans.
There it is.
You relate to the Chapmans? Yeah, don't he look like Willie Brown? Yeah, he look like Willie Brown. Like he got that nose, that Willie Brown nose. So you be
And
like,
that's a wrap. It's gonna be a nickname, if anything.
Huh?
If nothing else, you just got a new nickname.
Right, exactly. You're like, I don't know no Millie Brown. Nah, you a Brown. I know
Right.
you a Brown. You're like, what? So that's how it is. I said it was like that with Jamie. It wasn't like that. A lot of people were like, oh man, who is this dude? So I said, you have to understand. I said they went, a lot of people, and it's a red state, blood red state, the first state to secede from the Union. It was like, we our own country. Screw y'all. We doing our own thing. And I said that history is not too far ahead. And they went with the devil they knew. I was like, so you look at the demographics, there are certain counties and certain towns and I guess townships within South Carolina, very small towns, rural, but still, kind of small, that, would probably like to vote outside of the standard tradition. But that didn't happen. I said, and for me, you getting all bent out of shape about it, I'm not expecting it to change. I said, it'll take time. It will take time for that to change. The environment has not changed drastically enough in South Carolina for people to be like, oh, dang, we got to make a change. At that time, the change will have to happen so quickly that too many people there will be left behind. And that's just me, speaking as a Southerner. And I said, you from California, man, like you from Compton, like, like you don't know nothing about it. you don't know. Like how you gonna tell me you in a big city? Like that's a big city compared to us. Not LA, just the city of Compton, like the city of Long Beach. That's a big city to us, right? And so I was like, man, you from this huge, y'all have cities of 40,000. We got cities of like little towns of like 400. Come on. Where everybody's related. I said, so there's a difference in culture. And I got on the phone with her and she told him the same thing. she said, it's the same thing. She said, man, if people don't know you like that, and if they can't relate to you for whatever reason, they kind of like, straight kind of pull back a little. You have to have some history, good or bad. She said, I don't like Lindsey Graham, and I didn't vote for him. She said, but my little vote, I'm just a black woman. What my little vote gonna do? She said, it's not enough of us.
Yeah, and I think some realistic understanding of how districts work, how those lines are drawn.
Yep.
And getting involved in that process is more important than, this once every 4 years push to act like you understand the bigger picture. Like, I think this is what frustrates me the most. Like, if they really want to change, I wish organizations like, we'll just say activists, I wish they would show up to like district meetings where these lines are being decided, where tax and the allocation of resources is being decided, or some policy that's going to basically greenlight developers to come in and pretty much force folks out by hiking up the real estate value. These are things that could be done on an activist level. We don't see that same energy for these things, and they're much more local. They're much more accessible. You could get more of the local population involved that way, especially if it's a place where we live at. Like, the projects should have been a gold mine of votes to get more policy change. But you'll find that where we live the most at, are the highest concentrations we're at, we're the least involved.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I look at that and I see, like, you're right. And see, the thing is, like, when you have skin in the game, and it's sad that it is that way, but when you have skin in the game and you have something to lose, that's when a lot of people, when you worked for it, and even when you've inherited it, that's when you really see people who are more involved in many levels of local politics, and they understand how, statewide, regional, there are regional politics between states, especially in the South.
Yep.
And politics that are outside of that region, which is the national politics, and things just as things expand, as you go outside of your little town, little village, community, as it gets bigger, it actually just stays the same. People have something they want done. You have the money, you have the resources, you have the influence, get it done. And so for my family personally, like, when you have skin in the game, when you have land, when you have property, when you have things you've inherited, because someone put their life on the line to make sure they had this land, and they knew for future generations it would be there. You don't squander it, and you don't allow other people to squander, what they have, and direct them into what they can do with that property, and remind them of why it's important to get involved in local politics and things like that. And you're right. Like, if you go to the projects, I know if I go, oh Lord, back home, like, it's a high concentration, very dense population of us that are there. But getting involved, it's like twisting someone's arm,
Yeah, they should have a black board of directors, black individuals that's in charge of the police district there. I mean, just everything you can think of. But we tend to have the lowest percentage of involvement with those things on a managerial level. And these are the main things we complain about. I mean, on one end, I guess you can say, maybe this just comes with class, but at a certain point, we got nothing to lose. So, like, if people are really serious about getting up in arms about wanting Trump and all this, enough to have these senators come out and threaten us, like, you can get involved in local politics. You could.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, someone I remember years ago mentioned, they were like, if you just go to the courthouse and look at, we have magistrates. So if you go to a courthouse, and for any reason, different traffic court, child support court, you got, which would be family court, but with our courts, it's like there's a specific section for child support, and then there's everybody else. So because it's more course, we know we're in a gynocracy, more matriarchal, and they separate everything out, so you obviously know who going to child support. You know who they are. Like, it's like, what the heck? So they have that. You have farmers and property court. You have magistrates, specific magistrate court. So if you go into any of those courtrooms or any of those courthouses, and some are county seated, some are state seated, and you see like how things are handled, that gives you an idea of the rules of order, how things are managed, how people are being managed, how money is being managed. It gives you a basic idea of what's going on. Someone has to vote these people in. What qualities about this person make them a necessary entity here at this level. What's the judge's background? Who do they know? Who funds them? That type of stuff. I remember those years ago, somebody told me that. They were like, if you just go in the courthouse, but then again, it's like, who has time to do that? I know who has time to do it, but they want to spend time
multiplying by zero.
Watching Cardi B braid somebody's hair who need to be at work, outside, drinking Fuego Pops and eating the Takis and stuff, the hot Takis and the pork rinds. That's what they want to be doing. Instead of, going, braiding Tay them hair and doing all that and shining up their car, their rims and all this. Instead of, you ain't got nothing to do. You could be at least gaining some information, what is really going on here? Why are we in this? You have all the time in the world right now.
We go right back to culture.
Right
back to culture.
You're right. Like, I don't know how they do this. How are they gonna do this and so and so? Now, some courtrooms you cannot go into, but anything that will be public, you can go. And you're right. It is the culture. Why are you searching for knowledge? Why are you trying to help another Black person? Why are these white people so problematic for you? That type of thing. And you might see things in your own people that you're like, I don't know about all that. Like, oof, I don't know about that. Why? That? What? I know, because I've been sitting in courtrooms time to time, and I'm like, ooh.
It's a crazy thing to observe, especially when you really get, when you see a lot of the same things showing up over and over again. You just get this sense of how much of this stuff is self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Dr. Anwar.
Yeah, I see Dr. Anwar here. Yeah, you got the Takis Fuego, you got the all them snacks. I'm just like, it's a wall of preservatives. Green Machine, what's going on? Black Torch, Rashid, what's going on with y'all? Thank you for coming on my channel. We got Nameless Protagonist here. We're the title is Psychology, Rituals, and Epigenetics. I know we were talking about other things. That's cool, because it indirectly goes right into the flow of this topic. You all hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that Cash App. Nameless, if you have a Cash App or any kind of way people can donate, contribute to you, you're free to put it in the chat.
Yeah, and just
for me,
subscribe to the channel if they aren't already.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll put your channel in there. Did you put? Oh, that's something different. I'll put your channel back in there again. What did you say? Dr. Dunbar said, I once mentored kids and they love the Takis. Oh my God. Kids out here I think, well, I guess it's in DC as well. I hear that's something they just fighting over. Like, I see kids in front of the store. I'm like, what? Back home it's pork rinds. Kids, they have the pork rinds as if they're better or worse. They're both bad. But yeah, it is the culture. And speaking of Takis, that is one thing I wanted to bring up: eating bad food.
Oh yeah, because we're getting into epigenetics, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, one in the chat if you know what epigenetics are, and you can still listen. Mm-hmm. So we're on the same page.
Right. Because I got an intro and everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since we're 30 minutes, we might as well get, of course, the PhD understands.
Yeah. So, um, let's see. I have this image up. Now, this was my thumbnail, as you all know, epigenetics. This just gives a snapshot and example of epigenetics. And hopefully y'all put a one. Oh, good. Y'all know what epigenetics is. That's cool. I see ones in the chat. Yeah, Dr. Dunbar. So epigenetics is basically answering the question of nature versus nurture. It is a form of regulation of genes where usually the CH3, so you have one carbon atom surrounded by 3 hydrogen atoms, and that methyl group can lock or unlock genes. And when you lock a gene, it's usually for a protective reason. And the gene is usually being protected because there's some type of negative stimuli that's there in that environment, such as the preservatives from Takis. I'm just using this as an example. I don't know if it's true, so Takis people, don't sue me.
Right.
Y'all know y'all sell mess.
Allegedly.
Y'all sell trash.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Right. Allegedly. But I will say allegedly, something like that. If you eat high fatty foods, you have a high fat diet. I'm working on a project right now dealing with high fat diet and how it contributes to premature aging. So if you had not consumed a high fat diet for most of your life, or a critical time in your life, for instance, before the age of 10, would you not be diabetic with these methylated genes that will be used for digestion, used for insulin resistance, genes that are needed for your response to insulin? Would you have been diabetic later on in life if you hadn't been allowed to, or had no choice but to eat those foods? So we're talking about psychology. We're talking about, these rituals. There is culture involved in rituals, and there's possibly effects on epigenetics. So in this image, you have a mouse, a mother mouse. She's loving on her baby, and we're just so lovely. Mommy, I love you. I love you, baby. And they just so in love, motherly love. And you have, for instance, a demethylation of genes. So these genes are able to act and do what they're supposed to do. They're able to function properly. For instance, within the hippocampus of the brain, glucocorticoid receptors are activated. You have a normal functioning mouse, goes on, does what she's supposed to do, meets a guy, has kids, and moves on. So not only does she have positive outlook on life, but her offspring and future offspring will hypothetically have positive outlooks and everything. The hippocampus, these glucocorticoid receptors are healthy as long as there's nothing to interfere with that pathway, right? And over here on the other side, this little mouse is sad, maybe an orphan, maybe abused, maybe neglected, left alone, no one to call mommy, no one to hold when they're afraid, maybe not have a good diet, things like that. These genes in the brain remain methylated during development. Hippocampus and these glucocorticoid receptors are therefore methylated. They're not unlocked. They're not able to function properly. You have a mouse that grows up and they are anxious, they're on edge, they don't know what to do, they might be depressed, they're just like, man, I need some coffee, man, I gotta keep going, man. This is a person who's more likely to become addicted to substances, substance abuse. Not necessarily because I wasn't held enough, I didn't get enough lap time, as Dr. Frances Cress Welsing mentioned. Rest in power to her. But perhaps there was a chemical imbalance that happened. If you have a person who's abused, they're going through post-traumatic stress syndrome and things like that, can lead to a person lacking in certain ways, mentally and emotionally. So these are hypotheses for epigenetics. and how epigenetics works. Now, there are a lot of genes that are involved in controlling the methylation, demethylation, acetylation, deacetylation, methyltransferase, and acetyltransferase functions. I know that was like 6 different things I said, right?
So could
You,
I provide a framework for folks to kind of work with what
yeah.
you're talking
So,
about? So, okay,
oh, go ahead.
so
I'm about to share
oh,
my
go ahead.
screen. Go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, you said you were still working on you. Go ahead. I ain't mean to interrupt.
No, you can speak. I'm just gonna share my screen for now, but you go ahead. It's just the first slide.
Okay. So to kind of tie this into how this sort of relates to psychology and rituals and epigenetics, if I say, for example, I speak of frequencies dogs will have trouble hearing. Cannabis is lyrical version of German engineering. Raw metaphors get you high for months. Fly around and run twice, fly out refueling once. There ain't too many categories I can fit in when it comes to spitting because I'm overqualified for the position. The laser guided lyrical hybrid creating scripts so sick I got an arm wrestle my pen to write it. So clearly I was saying something.
Mhm.
But if I do the exact same thing and say, I speak of frequencies dogs will have trouble hearing. Cannabis is the lyrical version of German engineering. Raw metaphors that get you high for months. I fly around the earth twice without refueling once. Ain't too many categories I can fit in when it comes to spitting because I'm overqualified for the position. The laser guided lyrical hybrid creating scripts so sick I got the arm wrestle my pen to write it.
Right.
If we look at
Hey, all right.
if we look at the lyrics, right?
Mhm.
That's your genetic code. But what changes is the way those lyrics are expressed, i.e., epigenetics. The way
Right.
you deliver that is your epigenetic code and influence. And there's a lot of things that, even though you have your lyrics down, it doesn't mean the delivery is going to be as it's intended. This
Mhm.
is the relationship between DNA, which is hard locked, and your epigenetic expression. That's going to be a term you hear a lot. Your genes have an expression. So it's the way your body, i.e., the song, the track, everything that goes along with that. Because I think this will be important when we get into the different proteins that influence the way a gene can be expressed and their relationship to the environment, i.e., the hormonal environment, and the way that gets recorded onto the track.
Right. You're right. I mean, what you said is what it is. Like your lyrics, what you have put together, that's the code. That is the language of the gene, language of you as a person. And what happens to regulate that? That is the epigenetics. What helps to translate the language in different ways. You know, the language, the God code, as I say, is the DNA, genomic DNA, your replicon DNA, which then is, you know, transformed or transcribed into your RNA, different forms of RNA that's translated into protein, protein being usually the final step in trying to understand this God code, this creator code that you have, right? And so you're right. It does deal with expression. Everyone expresses genes differently. And so I have like different slides here. I go into, let me skip through some of these because we're getting actually to this part.
Also, shout out to you for putting this together like that. I'm guessing, you ran through an entire rabbit hole to see the connection between psychology, behavior, and all of this.
You know what? Actually, I was gonna say this earlier before you came on. Actually, this is a topic that I discussed with other scientists. I just have not discussed it here in depth.
Really?
It's a conversation that we have because dealing with IRB, with Institutional Review Board, when you're dealing with human subjects, we're dealing with genetics where we know something that we're giving them causes a methylation change, and we can quantitate that.
Oh,
We
wow.
have to do psychological evaluation. We have to understand the patient pre and post treatment And so, yeah, we do talk about these things. And when you're dealing with aging, you're dealing with epigenetics.
Yeah.
Aging is, just damage that's hard to repair. I forget who it was. I think it was the guy that you mentioned once, Michiko or Michio, Dr.
Oh yeah,
Michio,
Kakio.
Kakio.
Kakio, the dude,
Yeah,
that the string theory guy.
yes, he mentioned that about aging. I looked him up. If you look him up and look up epigenetics or aging or something, you'll find his quote about that. He said, aging is basically, you just damage that can't be repaired.
Yeah, your epigenome gets thrown out of whack, and
Right.
because you can show signs of aging really, really young
Mm-hmm.
when that epigenetic pattern is not being observed, which I had a suspicion then at that point about melanin and how melanin has a side effect that kind of protects that. But that may be another conversation in the future. But
Well, it depends on it. It protects to a certain point, but melanin has, everyone thinks it's the super molecule. It is a super molecule. It is a superconductor. But it's also, since it does block the sun, the more melanin you have, Dr. Larissa Nahn, Larisa, her last name is N as in nice, or Nancy, Nonn is her last name. Larissa Nahn. I forget what institution, but she does a lot of work with prostate cancer patients, mostly Black male patients, and vitamin D. Melanin blocks vitamin D.
yeah,
Have the more vitamin D you're blocking, and so bone density, uh, mental stability, psychological effects of melanin and the lower amount of vitamin D absorption, vitamin D3 specifically absorption, can cause a lot of problems. It also causes problems with therapy absorption. So you have to give higher doses of the drug, because we couldn't figure out, and she was talking about it once, like in a presentation she was giving, and she was like, I couldn't figure out why we had to give some of these patients that are African American like 10 times the dose that we give white patients.
is it an issue with it not bonding to the molecules, or because I
Well,
know in a lot of instances they're
and
saying certain substances melanin binds to it, which is how we get addicted easier with less with certain things, but then maybe it's the opposite for other compounds.
Well, with vitamin D, it's just a simple blocking of the rays, and when you're blocking the rays, you're blocking the catalysis process, the breaking down
Right.
of certain things. And so she's like, it does affect the liver. It affects patients who have prostate cancer. They're more likely to have liver metastasis. They're more likely to have bone metastasis. And that would be obvious because if you have lower bone density as a man, especially at a later age, then you're going to have increased osteoclastic activity and decreased osteoblastic activity. So osteoclast versus osteoblast, that interaction is like Crips and Bloods. Literally you have blast with a B as in boy, building up the bone. C as in cut. They're cutting the bone. It's a Crips and Bloods type of horror story in your bones, constantly in your skeleton. The osteoblasts are building, the osteoclasts are cutting down. So it's metabolism and anabolism all over the place, just back and forth, back and forth. The problem is when your osteoblasts, lose their integrity because you're not getting enough vitamin D, you're not getting enough, subsequent molecular interactions that happen after vitamin D is activated. Then you have decreased osteoblast formation, mutations in osteoblast genes, epigenetics. You have methylation of those genes that will keep the
So it
osteoblast
propagates it.
on their job. Yeah, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where you have osteoclasts win at the end of the day.
Wow.
And you're actually have holes in your bones. If you ever look at scans of bone density, reduced bone density in men, especially in the hips, in the hip area, and in the femur, and you see that where there are holes in the bone. Wherever there's a hole, a gap, a tumor cell is going to try to get there to fill it. So you have metastasis, they're going to go there, they're going to fill that area, they're going to take over. So that's the problem we're noticing. But yeah, that's just another example of like how, our physiology can in some ways work against us. And that kind of goes into psychology, because I'm sorry guys, I know it's men, and there's women listening, but there's men, y'all got to go to the doctor more often. I know there's psychological.
You're the person to tell us that. I mean, there's not a lot of, you're ground zero in seeing how, even a lot of the funding that does get dedicated to observing that, there are differences in nuance depending on, race, specifically with us. So, salute to you again for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dunbar, for the Cash App. Yeah. Alicia said, great analogy. Yeah. I have to look at things when I'm seeing these things at a molecular level. I have to make a real world comparison, because I, deal with children from time to time, and I have to break it down for them. I deal with students who are still freshmen in college, or maybe a little higher in college, and so I have to break it down. I say, when you're in your test, nobody's going to ask you how you came up with this answer. You need to have the ideas in your head, some type of battle that's happening. That's what it is. It's a battle inside of the body, inside of that cell. That's where whoever wins, like, you go further, even if you're mutated. You mutant shall go further and continue being a mutant. Like, this is your destiny. Clearly, that's kind of what it is. If you look at a lot of these medieval movies and the way things are, I'm like, man, this ain't nothing but epithelial cells fighting the immune cells, the tumor cells fighting the immune cells. That's all it is. Reds and the whites, the blacks and the blues. Like, that's what that is. You have to make those real life comparisons to keep it straight in your head. Add the names of the cells, the names of the genes, the names of the different enzymes later. Those are just helmet, shield, boots, gloves. That's the sword. That's what that is. The enzymes and the proteins. It's just the armor that cell has to wear to protect itself, right?
Yep.
So if you look at this slide, this is just a synopsis, really, but it's asking what is epigenetics. There are certain drivers of epigenetics, of course, psychological, and then genetic, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you have changes in RNA, the DNA, the protein. These are initiated by external environment and the choices that an individual makes. So more than likely, your external environment is going to predict or determine what choices you make, right? I'm not drinking hot chocolate and it's 95 degrees out here. I'm gonna drink. You hear me? I'm gonna drink a lemonade with some ice, and it's made with real lemons in the house. Like, I'm not drinking no hot chocolate in 95. No. Now, if you're in a different area, yeah, you're in Chicago in the middle of December, that's what you probably choose. So you have to look at that. Your choices in diet, your ability to mitigate stress, your absorption and filtration of certain toxins, how well you can, avoid that or mitigate that in some kind of way. So when I'm looking at the example of, the weather, the environment determining what I'm going to drink to keep myself cool or to warm myself up, then I also have to look at the calorie content. And, we don't want to do that, but the calorie content, which one has more calories, which one is, well, water's the best, but if you just have to have that hot chocolate, you go ahead and do your thing. Maybe you don't need to add the marshmallows this time. Maybe don't add half a bag of marshmallows in the hot chocolate. Maybe just a couple. Keep your caloric intake down a bit, because that's adding to more stress in your body, more battles in your body, so to speak. So this is a very simple example, but one example, like, the direct driver of this, due to some psychological issues that, or not even, I wouldn't say issues, but psychological effects of your environment, your diet, your stress, different toxins, indirect. You can have nonverbal communication. I didn't like how he talked to me, so I'm gonna eat this whole bag of Doritos and a whole bag of M&Ms.
Yeah, people's stress responses and the way they, try to, I guess you can create psychological triggers, because this is how, maybe certain events that happen that remind you of those stressful behaviors get associated with a particular food. And so, you eat that so you can forget about it, and it just becomes a ritual over time.
There you go. Thank you, Alicia, for the super chat. She said, I'm about to crip walk right through this info. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, but you're right. That would be a ritual. There was another thing when it comes to rituals that affected everybody. And I think I spoke about this once before. I couldn't find an image that was not it just denigrating the Black people, because every image I found was us dressed up like we were in slavery. So I was like, okay. And I couldn't get the image of that day from my mom and Tom. So it's okay. But we would have, a hog killing. It happened on probably the coldest day of the year, like sometime in December. It was usually like Thanksgiving, Christmas, sometime that time, either right after Thanksgiving or right before Christmas. And it would be so cold out there. I mean, eyelashes frozen, got frost on your eyelashes. It's so cold. And there was a huge hog. The men would be carrying it, and we all had a job to do. The women had a job, the men had a job. If I knew back then what I know now when it comes to the caloric intake and the fat, and we had the blood soup, and we had every piece of the pig, the hog was used. Every single piece of the hog was used. Intestines were hanging up, everything, and it may seem gross, but this is consistent. It's a traditional ritual that people do all around the world. Belize, areas of Costa Rica and Africa. There are areas that the people that do it there as well. In Europe, I know in Spain they do it. And I didn't realize that this ritual had it for me at the time as a child. The psychology around it was, we're doing something together. We're all going to eat for a good while. This is going to hold us through the winter. And we're all helping each other prepare this, but it's pork, and it was our hog. So we fed it. We were nice to him and everything, and all that. I remember petting the hog on the head, like, hey, how you doing? I'm a little kid. I don't know. I remember my dad taking his bandana out around his neck and putting it around the hog's eyes. I remember that. I remember him doing that. Like, I remember this stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. And I remember having to stand back, and, watching all this happen. It didn't even feel like real. It was a ritual. I didn't realize that at the time, but that was a ritual. And the epigenetic part of it would be the stress later of looking at that, or long-term every year doing that, eating that type of food every single year, particularly in the winter going into the spring. Eating that food where you have an increased chance of high blood pressure, right? Diabetes, things like that. And so I looked at that and I was like, nah, why'd y'all have us doing that? And she's like, that's what we always have done. Like, we didn't know any different. We don't do it now because you can't. We haven't had days where it was cold enough, really, since a long time ago. But that was a ritual. There was a lot of families that look down on it, like, why are y'all still doing that? This is not like, what are you doing? This is not the 30s or 40s. And we were like, well, why don't you do it? That right there, the psychological drivers behind doing this, and it being like, oh my God, you guys lied to us all those years, that type of thing. The whole Santa Claus thing.
Yeah, especially when it gets built into the emotional centers like that, what I mean, in the limbic system, where, it just becomes a part of your worldview. And you just pass these things on when you're in your most formal, malleable years, rather. And this goes back to the relationship that culture plays with all of these three things combined. and how you get what I guess they call in social psychology a social heritage.
Yeah.
These are all rituals that they get embedded into the culture, and they can then have psychological and epigenetic effects, to where you it isn't so much that you pass the physical activity down, but you pass the sequences of emotions and feelings attached to that.
Right.
Your stress from that could manifest in so many different ways. And when you get into Jungian psychology and you start seeing things like archetypes, the way you deal with that tends to either form something that gives you stronger character, or it can manifest as a disorder later, So,
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
things to
That's
pay
one
attention
thing
to.
that they're talking about here. The stress, the diet. I mean, this is not just, it's not just stress and diet. Any image I put is a simplified version of what's really happening. I always bring up the example of this study done in I think it was Japan, either Japan or China, where they found that within the fetus, macrophages within the fetus, there was PM, I think it was PM 2.5 particles. So particles that the mother breathed in made its way to the placenta, and macrophages, of the placenta of the fetus, for the fetus specifically, had the PM, the microparticles of pollution.
Mm.
So not only were these particles not filtered properly through the mother to the fetus, but the fetus had not, they know that we don't have the ability, the placenta does not have the ability to get those particles out. They're that small. So that, of course, means that this child before birth
Compromised.
already have respiratory complications and possibly diabetic complications. Because with respiratory issues, it can cause a lot of, for some reason, there's a lot of diabetic issues that can happen. Of course, if you have asthma, hard to breathe, hard to do a lot of physical activity, and therefore, might be taking steroids, you might be taking some type of um, uh, nebulizer system where to help you breathe, help open up your bronchial tubes and dilate them. But if they give you a steroid, then of course you're more likely to be, um, diabetic. They have shown that. So when you look at this and tying this in with the ritual, we don't know what those particles have. Those microparticles from that particular study had on the mother. What effect it had on her immune system, her digestive system, things like that. I don't know. It was not in the study. Only focused on the fetus. Go ahead. What you want to say?
And what gets interesting is how even if that baby that does come out, she may not have any symptoms, but
Right.
her daughter might.
That's epigenetics.
And that's epigenetics at work. So, and this is how, they've identified a lot of this with a lot of mental illnesses that happen sometimes. You'll hear about, okay, well, you may have the genetic predisposition for it, but you may not go through the external or stimuli that's necessary to really trigger that, and it kind of goes back to the hormone receptors that you're that's there to detect these kind of things. And if you're in the right event and the right stress hormones are released, it could trigger these things. So you have no idea what you're passing on when you compromise, your circumstance when you're still in the womb. And I think the relevance of that is going to get much bigger when, we talk a little bit later about the plantation and how a lot of that experience likely has been following us epigenetically, and how, unconsciously we may be bringing about a lot of these behaviors and not realizing it, especially through the mothers. But go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I picked this image. Here, abuse, mothering behavior. Mothering behavior can be seen from the child as an anxious mother, helicopter mom type thing. You know, it's difficult for a female child to respond properly to that mother that is anxious. Then not only does the girl child assume being anxious as a woman is okay, but they will have to adjust in how they respond to their mother or bring things up to their mother to prevent her from feeling pain, because a child is going to see that as she's feeling some type of pain and discomfort. Sexual assault is a given. That's obvious that this is clear psychological damage. That if not dealt with immediately, and this is the issue with many children, even infants, during early development with sexual assault, is that it's not caught and dealt with immediately. No one's there to save you. No one cares about you. These are the effects. That's why I have at the top a person who may have been abused, a constant need to compartmentalize their tasks, meaning that you are able to control each task step by step by step. Having something that you can control because you can't control or you don't have the tools to face what happened to you, and accept that, okay, this happened to me. Let me try to help others. Let me face this demon and get through this so I can find out, okay, this is who I am. This is something I've dealt with. I've come out on the other side, and really deal with that. Take the time to deal with that. Otherwise, you may be making decisions that affect your own sex hormones as you go into your reproductive years.
Yep.
Affect your ability, putting yourself in a position where you're consuming carcinogens or teratogens or mutagens, and you are literally putting yourself, because you didn't deal with things, in a position where you don't have epigenetic, you may not have epigenetic changes in regulation yet, but you will literally consume something that will affect your germline, your genes, for 3 generations down or more. So that's why, talking about these things, therapy, and actually going through the steps of therapy and doing this, very important.
And I will say that if something can be traumatic enough, know that there are sometimes instances where you can get, I believe what they called an acquired inheritance, meaning you can actually change the genetic code by virtue of what's occurred to you. And, a lot of the difference between that is kind of the difference between what's generally called epigenetics and then transgenerational inheritance. You know what I'm saying? So like the two have a relation to each other, and the common denominator is how existentially threatening was the event that occurred to you, and how did your body respond?
Right.
People be surprised, and I think they really started finding out a lot about this stuff, during World War II.
Exactly. People have tried to debunk it as well. We'll just go to the next slide quickly, but people tried to debunk it. I was reading something earlier today that was saying, that they wanted to try to debunk the fact that someone in the Holocaust, survivors of the Holocaust in Germany, they were just faking the funk and, this and that. And I'm like, really though? Like, that is a traumatic event. For me, if I'm in a position where I am, fearing for my life or terrified, first thing that happens for me personally, I get extremely hot, and I'm just, that's your fight or flight, turning on. That's your adrenaline pumping. Adrenaline is a pyrogenic molecule. It's going to make you hot because it's trying to get you to get the hell on, like, run. Run, like, what I'm saying? It's basically the molecule is telling you to get the hell out, get away. And then afterwards, usually when your adrenaline is that high, people notice that, and I've noticed that, I can become increasingly cold. Adrenaline drops, temperature drops, right? It drops lower than it was before your adrenaline increased, and that happens. And consistently having that happen over and over time, body becomes numb. And we're not saying that, I don't think the studies have said that just that one thing having the adrenaline, having corticosteroids being affected, glucocorticoids affected, your insulin levels affected, you're starving, all these different things. We're not saying that, even those things are causing the epigenetics. It's what the people did after those things were happening. Their hormones, it takes time for these proteins and hormones to change. And once they do, it's kind of locked in. And that was the point that the studies were trying to make. This is kind of a lock and key mechanism, and someone took the key and swallowed it, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, like we go back to the rap analogy I was using earlier. If you've got a situation to where, when you're transcribing one verse to another, you know what I'm saying? You're trying to record the track again.
Yeah.
And you run into an issue where, you confuse wish with dish because there was some outside noise in the recording studio that overplayed it. That happens enough and you get a mistranscription, in the DNA over time. Now, right. You could change the environment and you could record and that sound doesn't happen and it'll record properly. But, right. Over time, things that are similar like that, let's say there's a gene that overlaps with other things that influence other things, you may have huge effects because of something that occurred that raises cortisol levels that has direct relations to all these health and mental issues that seemingly have no connection normally. And now you've just made that a permanent part of, your code, your genetic code.
Right.
So, I mean, this is important when we look at this concept of nature versus nurture. Environment plays a deeper role than people really give credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to, do this, when you asked me about it, I was like, you know what, I got to do this. I mean, like I said earlier, I talked to other scientists about this. Bringing in the psychological aspect of it more thoroughly is very important. So this slide goes into more detail, giving a, I guess you could say a flow chart, a prognosis of, like, I think this was, I forget what it was, methylated. I forget what it was. MET-S was, but anyway, you have how you want to prognose somebody who has this methylation issues. So if you're looking at dietary habits or a high-fat diet or standard American diet, you have epigenetic modifications indicated here on the DNA by stars. These epigenetic modifications lead to altered metabolic pathways, usually, because these are these central role pathways to keep you alive. You further lead to metabolic disorders, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. And so the therapeutic approaches from this particular image is the opposite, a healthy diet supplementation that can be used to block right here. So you want to block as high up on this chain as possible. If you already have these epigenetic modifications, block those modifications of DNA methylation, histone deacetylation, and or microRNA expression. So the last one, the microRNA expression, is one that's still under review, because microRNAs have multiple roles in the regulation of genes. They can auto-regulate, so they can regulate themselves, and they can make the situation worse. So a lot of times when they talk about microRNA gene expression and DNA methylation, they only pick certain microRNAs. There are tons of them, but there's only certain microRNAs that they focus on when it comes to like DNA methylation or acetylation, things like that.
So you're saying they have ways of directly trying to interfere with methylation using okay, that's interesting. So what you're saying is they can force the epigenetic reaction in something to get a desired result of a gene expression.
Yeah, you can do that. So you can, for instance, what I did was I added it was indirect, way indirect, but I added an anti-androgen therapy that patients, is a standard of care for patients right now. But it ain't doing what it's supposed to be doing. So long-term, patients that take it long-term actually have worse outcome than worse prognosis than patients who do short-term. And we know why, because a lot of the genes that it's supposed to affect, it does its job with those genes, but indirectly methylates or indirectly causes a lot of other issues of the genes, particularly genes that directly bind to DNA.
So it'd be like taking a laxative for too long, and then now you're having digestion problems because you're not absorbing nothing.
Right. You're having digestive problems. You're not absorbing anything. Your body has kind of been like, okay, anything that comes in here, I'm throwing it out quick. You're out of here, until it learns that and adapts to doing what it's supposed to do again. And so, for instance, with certain genes, we can induce this methylation because, like I said earlier, methylation is a form of protection.
Right.
We try to protect the creator strand, the creator code that's there.
In other words, you don't mess up the rap verse.
Huh?
So it's, in other words, not messing up the verse.
Not messing up the verse, And for instance, every time you say five words, someone goes, "Hey!"
Right.
Shout out to Art New Style in the chat. But, every 10 words, someone like, "What?" No one does that. You're like, "What the hell? Like, what is this?" Well, we listened to that music, and that's what was happening. Facts. It was an interruption of the code, and those are what we'd call introns. But those are introns. The little ad-libbing, that's an intron.
Right.
The little snare in the back that just gets on your nerves, but it needs to be there.
Updating the lexicon.
The little snare, okay, that's the those are the RNA binding proteins that just really need to go away. But they're there, and they're like, look, we evolutionarily stuck here. We ain't going nowhere. Sometimes they need to be there, but I don't think they need to be there all the time. They just periodically come on through. But, right now when I'm giving this drug, and there should be standard androgen receptor function, standard androgen hormone function, you in the way. You kind of player. You in the way. And when I add the drug, why are you copying yourself over and over? Why are you accumulating yourself more and more? Which adds more fuel to the fire, more methylation, more problems for me if I'm a patient, right?
Right.
And I'm looking at this like, you mother, I'm just like, I can't take this no more. I'm looking at it molecularly, and I'm trying to analyze this. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have to use another drug to block the indirect effects of this drug. And so that's what I did. And it was another indirect drug. It upstream of the target gene. 6 other genes are pushed down. Their expression is blocked. They're literally, bound to by this antibody, and they can't move. It's like tying them up with a rope. They're just stuck. They can't activate. Nothing can bind to it. They're stuck. And then as the drug moves through and it breaks down little by little, the smallest part of this drug, after it gets through all those other genes and knocking them off, it can actually bind, still has functionality to bind to this RNA binding protein and, shut it down. So that's what we had to end up doing. The RNA binding proteins, the microRNAs, they work really similar. Sometimes when we see this methylation occur, especially in like diabetic patients and patients who are not responding to hormone treatments, microRNAs they're through the roof. I mean, the fold change is like 10-fold increased expression. Like, what the hell? Like, what is going on here? And these are patient samples. This is not like I'm looking at my cells. I'm comparing my cells to the patients, but I'm looking at the patients, and I'm like, why do you have like so much microRNA? So this is another reason why you want to talk about this topic. Every patient is different. When you start comparing ethnic groups, when you're looking at epigenetics, that's where you start to see things, break down a little bit more. Where you see, not just one gene, but you see classes of genes, families of genes that are heavily methylated, trimethylated, dimethylated. Trimethylated meaning it's 3 methyl groups on one part of that gene.
Yeah, I try to, well, maybe this is the best way of looking at it, but I came to understand that by reimagining the way it looks as if it were a Venn diagram. So
Yeah.
like when you move one, it influences the other two in a certain way. So yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then when you have like, going back to diet, if you look at diet, this little mouse eating eating a standard American diet, donuts and everything, hamburgers, and then methylated themselves. The children are going to have that methylation, but really it depends on the mate. Is the mate eating the same food? Because of course they're going to have half and half. This is why, if this mouse is, and of course this is representing a person, but if the mouse is stuck in their ways, well, this is how I'm going to cook. I cook pork 3 times a week, and if you don't like it, you can go to McDonald's. We just heard the Crimson Cure, talking the other day. He eats what I cook, right? They eat what I make them. I forget the exact title, but y'all get the gist. She was going in, and I was in and out, but I heard some. I was like, okay, all right, you can't be like that, ladies. Like, you just gonna eat what I cook, because if you do that, you're probably increasing the chances of methylation. Do you want your child to be methylated?
Well, there we go with ritual,
yes,
and you were talking about that before.
Methylation of your kids. No, I was kidding.
You should say it just like that too.
Voting for Trump and Biden need to be voting against this methylation. That's what I'm talking about.
Facts.
Vote against the methylation of your kids, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Then you're going to be mad, why my child 6 years old diabetic? Well, let's look at his genes. Like, let's see what's going on here.
See, this is where we get the conversation we had not too long ago in the media about how, Black women have a genetic disposition to be bigger, and then they tie it to stress hormones, and like it's true but not true. Not like they're saying. You still have that very first thing on the list you put there, which is changing your patterns, period.
Yes.
So
changing your patterns up here. These are easier patterns. Anything that's above this arrow right here, this red arrow, anything above this arrow, it can be changed. Even epigenetic modifications can be, in some cases, reduced or reversed, depending on the gene.
In other words,
just DNA methylation. You have protein methylation that occurs. That can be changed. That can be reduced and reversed.
In other words, you can become a better rapper.
You can be a better rapper. You can be better than these mumblers. You can become a better rapper. You can become a better writer. of the work, like you could definitely become a better rapper, because the fact that you can make that change and it's so easy, it's overnight. This also goes into psychology with meditation, with spirituality. It goes into a lot of things when it comes to, let me go back to this other slide, with rituals. There's certain ritual ingredients that are needed or expected. If you're talking about like, well, I feel like I just have to eat pork rinds, 5 times a week. Like, why? What is going on? What are those pork rinds doing for you? What is the Takis doing? Are they talking to you in your sleep?
Apparently.
You sleep with them under your pillow, like the tooth fairy comes?
Under the pillow. I mean, that's real talk.
For what? What are they doing for you?
What do they call it? Comfort food?
Yes, comfort. Oh, you know what they call it? Since we're on this slide, you know what else they call it? I'm from the South.
Oh, God. Soul food. There we go. Yep. Gotta let that go. Everybody kicked the bucket from that movie.
Yep. I was doing that. Yeah, I was looking at the Boondocks when he said that. He said, "Wait."
Riley was going ham. Not Riley, what's the name? Huey. He was mad. Like,
He was like, "Wait, everybody like why they went right back to eating the same fatty foods that killed the grandma?" Like, yep. He was like,
yeah,
"Oh my god."
sounds about right.
Mm-mm. And you look at rituals. You look at these rituals. I just wish that sometimes we would adopt different rituals, perhaps, and different ideas about like what are you doing. Be more logical about what you're doing. When you sit down with a questionnaire and you ask patients like, okay, so write down what you eat in a day, and like you said, the comfort food. A lot of times when you're consuming the comfort food, you're not conscious about what you're consuming.
Well, it's why I say that, in general, and why I brought this up for rituals. Any conscious ritual that you don't take agency over becomes an unconscious ritual that dominates your unconscious behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up essentially, that's why I like using the limbic system comparison, because it kind of is adjusting, when you say the way an environment makes you quote feel, it's kind of what we're talking about. It determines the filter that you view the world around you, with regards to things. So if you don't make a conscious effort, which is that prefrontal cortex, if you don't condition yourself to forward that ritual there and consciously make a ritual that benefits you rather than harms you, a habit can be beneficial or useful in that exact way. Like a habit is nothing more than a ritual as it relates to behavior.
Right. It's a personal social contract.
Yep.
You've
Yep,
made
that's a good way of putting it.
with yourself.
Yep.
Well, not really social, but you made a contract with yourself. Everyone has an inside voice. And
Well, I mean, you say you're talking to your subconscious, but that's another
yeah,
combo.
that's exactly what I'm getting to. You're having a conversation with your subconscious, your
Shadow.
answering it, your shadow. You're listening to it, you're answering it, you're arguing with it from time to time, and it's like, look, sometimes it's like, man, do your thing, whatever you want to do. But I'll be here waiting to tell you, I told you so. That's the thing.
Feeling
And
guilty.
huh?
I said, ready to feel guilty.
Right. I should have listened to you. Well, what
Right.
happened? As if you don't know, that type of thing. And your subconscious is like, I've been here, like, I told you not to do that. I told you not to do this. But you've already made that contract. Some people, that's why I think a lot of times, if you want to call it prayer, meditation, anything, therapy, if that helps you, writing things down, keeping a journal, having more clarity on things and looking at things for how they really are. Sometimes I honestly think like people's subconscious, the inside voice is, on some Devo stuff. Like, you gonna eat this bag of Doritos and shut up, that type of thing. You like, dang, like you're getting bullied by your subconscious. Like, what have you not resolved in the past to cause your inner voice to be like, do it. You do it now, and you better do it. Like what the hell? Like what is going on? That should not happen.
You just cited probably one of the most profound understandings that Jungian psychology offered to modern psychology, right there.
Mm-hmm. That battle.
Yep. And how far back it goes. I mean, when you look at a lot of the behavior that some people really engage in, and we begin to have this conversation about arrested development, so much of the issues we have now with our social contract between men and women, which is where this is eventually probably going to lead to, and why I brought that up. These things have been compromised from not just on a cultural level, but even on, it's being carried out on a macro level and micro level in the home. When you have these images on TV that reinforce a lot of this, you're no longer thinking about it. It's going straight to that limbic system.
Right. I got to act on this.
And they already showed the correlation between what happens to your limbic system when you watch something on TV or any image of it, and the hormones that are released that correlate to you actually doing it. in a way you experience it physically, even though you're not doing it.
Ah, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But see, that's also why they call, you're watching television. This is inactive stimulation. It's not, you're not, because you're not doing it. But I can still see your point. It still has an effect, of course.
Right. So if you've got a neurology or a neurological pathway, for example, that's responsive to that, and you've created a psychological trigger. So we'll use the example of somebody that's been traumatized or abused when they were younger. Then they see it on TV, creates a psychological response, and two things happen. You've created the stimulus, and then it goes back to reliving that same point of trauma. Or you immediately invoke the coping mechanism or the ritual, the conscious ritual you may have created either behaviorally or physically to respond to that. And then that directly goes into the idea of imprinting, both on an epigenetic level, because we know, the imprint process can begin in the womb and carry out through, but we're really talking about what occurs when you're born and you get exposed to these environments that present that. It creates kind of like a double down effect. It's multiplicative. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. And so like when we look at this, you're right. I mean, we look at this slide, for instance. I just asked the question, like, how do rituals influence our daily lives through the thought, speech, and action? So how they can affect you. There's a in and out, garbage in, garbage out type of idea. Good things in, good things out. So ritual ingredients, certain ingredients are needed. I don't necessarily agree with the group assembly, a group's assembling to do something. Because as we just said earlier, like you can have this ritual, this agreement, a subconscious agreement, subconscious social contract that happens where you are following that particular mandate. But anyway, they also say barrier to outsiders. So this would be similar to like what would be the beginnings of a cult. You have a mutual focus or one particular goal set in mind. And they have a shared mood, which is I don't know. The shared mood thing, yeah.
Well, here's how you could look at it. Consider how the Black church operates in a lot of places you've been to. Do I need to say anything else? Like, there's a reason why you see the usual suspects that you do, especially in relation to the gynocracy. And Kendra did a good video recently, highlighting some of that. And a lot of the rituals that get established there, such as the association with figures in that book with a particular demographic of individuals belonging to the dominant society. We get that behavioral disposition being matched. Then we've got, rituals of redemption where, all you got to do is make a prayer, and one, some sky daddy's going to take care of it, and two, you get to forget everything that happened. So here you are imprinting this idea into your limbic system. So you go to a voting booth and you run the same algorithm that you did while you were in Sunday morning church that, you're doing here Tuesday afternoon trying to vote for a president.
Right.
So
regarding the outcome, well, I did what I did my best.
Well, I mean, we were talking about that earlier. I'll say that's my subjective opinion, but I see patterns here. And
I do see that.
If you see the same thing I'm seeing.
Yeah. I mean, a shared mood. I mean, I was trying not to go there. I was like, let me find something else. Let me look around. Find some, let me know. Like
I mean, call it like it is.
Let me try to find something else. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is Wednesday. Usually they have Wednesday night Bible study.
Yep.
So yeah, that is true. You have the matriarch of the church.
Mm-hmm.
You have the elder mother of the church. You have the first lady of the church. You have the first deaconess of the church. You have the choir director, who's usually a woman. You have a lot of women in the church, and there's a shared mood, which is no boys allowed. Men can't really
Unless you have an acronym, especially
Right,
these
of course. Yes. But if not, then you can't really, you can't really, honey, we gonna take care of this, you can go ahead and step down. The Lord will make a way. Don't worry about it. He got it. Don't come up on the mother of the usher board now.
Oh God.
Oh, you're gonna have a problem. That share of mood is very important because it does show there's a ritual. That's their most important ritual of the week.
Yep. It binds everything together. It's like the
Discipline.
glue.
Yes, discipline to that ritual. That is the broth of their life soup.
Yep.
Keeps everything flowing. It keeps everything, moving along. If you try to suck it all up, they're gonna be mad. Something's wrong. Because that broth, keeps everything from being exposed.
Well, it's also used as a self-regulating mechanism as well.
Right.
So when you look at that, you can tell immediately when you have this abstract description of someone or thing or behavior, such as why didn't you vote Democratic? I mean,
Yeah.
since we're talking about the mood of the gynocracy, but I mean,
Yep.
you see illustrations of that constantly. And then this idea of if you either step to it or you say that you don't agree to it, it's evident that you are outside of that group there. So it takes you to the next step.
Mm-hmm. This one is the I voted sticker right
Yep.
here. Mm-hmm. I voted. Kiss me, I voted. Georgia voter.
Right. Insert validation here, please.
Yes, that's your validation. Collective effervescence. Yes. Yes, we're gonna go on down. We done voted now. We're gonna go on down to the juke joint and get us some ginger ale and cheer wine. We gonna oh girl, we gonna live it up. Yep.
Over there yonder.
We got old man Biden in there. Get that truck out. That's what they'll say.
Wow.
The church hats and well, maybe not church hats. They sparkly disco ball hats. Shout out to my grandma. She still got one of them hats. The sparkly disco. Y'all know the sparkly disco ball hat the old ladies be wearing.
God. With the fan, with the hand fan to go with it.
Huh?
With the hand fan to go with it.
Oh, she's actually a Chinese fan now. But, she keeps that one in the car and the seat. Yeah, and she has the crocheted socks that come up halfway her leg. I'm like, Grandma, come on, man. But yeah, she one of them ladies, one of the little church ladies that got that collective effervescence, and then out of the ritual outcomes from that, you have solidarity. We were just saying. Right. Solidarity, emotional energy. Oh yeah. Symbols of relationship, standards of morality that they have set. That's the thing that it's not saying here.
Yep.
Because it's an open-ended flow chart. But this is the outcomes that they have set for the ritual, for the participants of the ritual have set. That's a cult.
Yep. Which is why.
Okay. Addiction to the process.
Well, this is why we call the gynocracy a cult of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
It hits all the checkbox marks.
Right. It hits that, and it also hits the strong association with signals and symbols. Different signals, different symbols. Signals give usually elicited a response, a quick response. Symbols are supposed to be absorbed, and then subconsciously processed for later time, hopefully, if it's done the right way. And you see this a lot with social media. I was listening to, I know Dr. Tiason Johnson is live right now. That's fine. Go support his channel. But he talked a lot about social media, what he sees on Twitter and different social media platforms. And I see that too. I mean, I'm like, y'all are on some other stuff. Some of the women that say things. Even Torian, he said something earlier. He posted something, a video earlier. It was a blue check Black woman that wanted to know why Black men are allowed to vote.
Well, look at what Seventh Coast just said in the chat. He said, what's interesting is when you try to change your ways, the collective attempts to shame you back into what's considered, quote, normal, end quote, for them, i.e.
Yes,
toxic rituals.
that's
So
a
that's
toxic.
speaking to what you were saying just now.
Yeah. Yeah. A toxic ritual. And then it's so crazy. This is a huge contradiction, and it's so our irony kills me sometimes, but it's like, you have this toxic ritual that the gynocracy carries out through their gynometrical. Oh yes. Gynometrical.
Gynometry.
Gynometrical. Mathematical.
Right.
Algebraic equations.
With a coefficient of 0 every time.
I'm done with you. I'm done. I was trying to flow something else extra on there. Everybody got to put like extra stuff on the words. Gynometry. That gynometry that they try to do with this type of ritual. You got in there to turn around and call somebody toxic masculinity. Like, you need to sit down, honey. Sit your ass all down. Sit down. Because like you're not even allowing, like, there's no group, there's no there in this ritual flow chart that you see on the screen. It doesn't say anything about, oh, let's make sure everyone has a voice. No, it's not allowed. And outsiders is anyone who doesn't agree with us. You make a barrier to outsiders. If that's men, oh, all the men, you can't be in here. Nope, nope, nope.
Yep.
Well, I'm a man, but I'd like to be a woman. We'll see. Pay your fees, and we'll call. Our people will call your people. How about that?
Meanwhile, there go that choir right there. There go your tryouts.
There you go. Yeah. I'm a straight black man, and I'm interested in what you guys want doing. It seems kind of productive. Why are you here? I know you ain't. I know you don't think you about to walk up in here. Like, who you think you is? Well, I just thought this would be a nice place to come, to commune and fellowship. And hey, I can cook. I can bring food and stuff. Nope. No, we don't need you here. You're not really doing what we, want you to do, because you're not broken. So we can't.
In other words, that's facts.
We can't fix you. We can't do nothing with you. You're not broken. So we can't control you. This is a type of ritual that you see a lot. You see it, well, and the environment is changing. So you see this ritual's power starting to lose this effectiveness in certain areas. But recently, in the past couple of weeks, it has, due to the controversy with Ice Cube and everything, it tried to rear its ugly head. But I just need it to be gone for good.
Well, I think the biggest issue is that Black men have been out of the church, the Black church in particular, for a very long time.
Right.
So a lot of the behavior reinforcement came from a lot of that dynamic that was placed there. So there's obviously residual effects of it, because everyone's going to hear about it, but it's generally through people's mothers and other matriarchs of the family that really continue that ritual. So even if folks haven't been able to go to church because maybe, the COVID situation,
right.
It's still being proliferated, but I think now it's being identified for what it is. Even though people may not have words to describe it, it still hits the definition of each of these things in the flow chart. And it can be carried out in the ways that they were saying, like through social media and, through our music. And even when you get onto the TV shows like Fox Soul's probably classic illustration of this point. The television show The View, we've seen all of them go up there and give these just open demonstrations of the ritual full time, and the cult of the gynocracy. So
I mean, if you all just keep it in mind, what you're talking about, Nameless, everyone keeps it in mind. When you watch these daytime television shows, these 3 points happen. The issue I have is they happen very often within one sitting.
Oh man, yeah.
They happen, think of an episode of The View or episode of Fox Soul. These 3 things happen a lot. If you break any of this flow at any point here or here, or where the outcomes go back to the ingredients and reassemble itself, auto assemble, like a when it goes back to auto assemble again and then start to flow, if you break that down, they malfunction. If you have a man there who is married, as far as I know, Ice Cube is still married, right, with children.
With kids.
His kids are doing very well. And he is speaking with, intellectual, fervor. And he's like, look, this is what it is. And, this is what I said. This is what they said. I didn't say that. No, this is what it is. Like every time he's opening his mouth, it's like punch, 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 in the face. And they're like, how dare you not listen to me? You're breaking down my ability to obtain my collective effervescence. You're breaking down my ability for us to maintain solidarity, because we heifers don't like each other up here on this platform.
Right.
But while you're here, we need to try to maintain,
appearances
front.
Well, look at how they jumped at Jeannie Mai, right?
Oh, yes.
Like
yes.
The whole thing at the end of the day, after she even read the definition of submission, ultimately, I almost called her a name. We'll call her the Big Mama. Her solution was keep it in the house at the end of all of that. And I thought that was important to point out, because it really speaks to that whole the flow chart. You know what I'm saying? So again, if you will have any questions on the gynocracy, man, refer to this chart and go take a look at any of those shows.
Any of those shows. And not only go back, not only look at these shows, I want people, if they can, because we all have a watch later button we can click. I know I've been using mine since this election stuff been going on. But the watch later button, click on the old shows if you can find them. Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, old episodes of Oprah, big Oprah, and old episodes of Ricky Lake. What's another one? What's the other lady's name? I think Sally Jesse Raphael was good. But you can see the responses of the women in the audience.
There we go.
A man came on the stage. For instance, when the Honorable Louis Farrakhan came on the stage, I think it was Donahue.
Yeah.
He was speaking, even when Khalid Muhammad was on there. Rest in power to him. When he was there, his head was glistening. He was like, I ain't taking no shit off none of y'all. Well, like that's how I felt. I was like, oh yeah, he about to bring it. Yes. I'm watching.
He did. He roasted him.
Watch how the women in the audience respond. You can pick out the simps in the audience. And, I'm talking about the black dudes that are in the audience. You can pick out the ones who were just like, oh my goodness, hand on the chest, clutching pearls, all that. I was like, oh no. So go back and see that. For some reason, I don't know what it is, but either people were more real back then and they didn't really care about the cameras, or they just don't show it now. In more recent, recordings of stuff in studio. But I would encourage anyone to go look at those older recordings of those shows, those talk shows. It's hilarious. It's hilarious because it fits right into this flow chart. And you can see when a man says something, or even a woman like Shahrazad Ali says something, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would say something. The women are like, how dare she tell the truth? What?
Right.
Because that's not a standard. That's not her telling the truth does not fit into the standards of morality. I hope y'all understand that.
Yep.
The standards of morality as an outcome of the ritual is to maintain our position, maintain our facade.
And, that's a big reason why when you look at what happened, when she passed, may rest in power as well. Mm-hmm. They were the first ones to run out and start condemning her and try to put all these hit pieces out on her to tarnish her name. Like it was immediate.
Wow.
That's cool. Yeah, like they were trying to, they pulled the homophobic card. They were saying that she anything that was anti-BLM, they were all over her on that point. They did not like her. And what surprised me was it was the gynocracy in the form of the men who had adopted the conditioning that were attacking her.
Yeah. Mark Lamont Hill was one.
Yep.
Who attacked her. I remember that.
Yeah, so remember, the gynocracy is not a gender exclusive thing. It's just the women are in control of it, but it wouldn't be possible without the cooperation of men as well. So it's not you, it's your conditioning.
Mm-hmm. That's the main thing to remember in this whole conversation. And I'm sure this will be, there are other streams on this. Everyone in the chat, welcome to come back. It is what it is. Nameless, of course, you're always welcome. And, that's the whole thing. Like, it's conditioning. It's the environment. I was looking at, and this is just, an image, just in case people are like, oh, she didn't define that right. You got the definition. How about that? And a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. People think that's another thing I've heard here in this space is that these women don't know what they're doing. The gynocracy is chaotic, and it's organized chaos. It has a specific prescribed order, and if you are a woman who is within the gynocracy, you're expected to act a certain way. You're expected to do things, and the things you're expected to do go outside of the natural order of things. So that's the main point that I wanted to make. Do you have anything else you want to talk about as far as rituals? Because I wanted to go to a few other things as well.
No, I think we've got the main correlation down that I want people to have in the back of their mind while they're listening to this, because it applies so much more. For me, when I get to see the metaphysical principle, psychology, and the science all run concurrently with each other, the idea is easy to conceptualize, abstract, and then put into practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I have this. Of course, I know people have asked me for different PowerPoints, and it's no problem. I have to email people. So in the previous PowerPoints that I've presented here or that I have, this is just running through. If in case people don't know, the beginnings of psychology as a discipline, and they have, of course, you have the link below here where you can click on the names when you go to that link, or click on these different. Anything that's in blue will link you to something else. There's a reference where this information came from on that site as well. I'm going to move forward. So when I think about epigenetics, I think about genetic drivers as well. We talked a little bit about, a lot about the psychological drivers of this and how rituals are involved in that. But there's, for me personally, because I always try to use a real world example to explain these very heavy concepts. There's a driver, a seatbelt, and insurance theory. The driver is certain genes that operate the epigenetic changes that are occurring due to the external stimuli, due to the environment. These are histone deacetylases, which are HDACs, DNA, methyltransferases, CPG islands, etc. So you have the ability to deacetylate something, which would open the potential to have an accident or something to happen, which would be methylation. Methylation, which would tear up the back of your car or tear up the end of your genes. The end of the gene is messed up. Okay? And sometimes this methylation can occur in what seems to be an accidental way, where it is not like hypermethylation. So I don't have it here on the screen, but hypermethylation is extreme forms of methylation, dimethylation, trimethylation. You have hydroxymethylation, which is where you add a hydroxy group with the methyl group, which is nothing but locking the door and locking the deadbolt. It's just harder to change that gene. It makes it even tougher. Okay, so that's the example. So the deacetylase enzyme would be removing an acetyl group, opening the way for more methylation. The DNMT makes it worse. It actually is a methyl transferase. So it's transferring methyl groups from one place to another on the gene. You ain't doing nothing, like my grandma say, but moving poop around on the plate. Like, you just moving stuff around. And that's exactly what DNMTs do. They keep the party going, keep the mess going. Okay, so a lot of times we want to know the expression of DNMTs and HDACs when we're looking at patient data, when we're looking at a lot of the things we're doing when we're giving the cells different drugs. So that's the driver that can control whether they're going to run in the back of somebody or stop on brakes, early enough. The seatbelt is the genes that protect these changes from being reversed. They are locked into the patient's genetics. Once again, these are the same genes. You should see some redundancy happening here. Genetics is a redundant system. It's done that way on purpose. HDACs again, DNMTs, you have HATs, a histone acetylase transferase. So this is the reverse, where acetylases can be transferred. RNA binding proteins, autoregulatory factors, which would be binding proteins that can control themselves. And finally, you have insurance. Certain genes ensure that if there is an accident in methylation, demethylation, or acetylation, the native gene sequence will be protected, meaning it will be transcribed properly or replicated properly. Even if that means that a gene will function differently, there's chaperone proteins, histone modeling proteins, histone remodeling proteins, promoter binding proteins, helicase enzyme, polymerase enzyme, ligase enzyme, transferase enzyme, so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So these are, for me, these different proteins and enzymes are examples of Allstate Insurance, Geico, Safe Auto, all the different types of insurance that are used that you can choose as the driver, that these genes pretty much have locked in which ones are going to be activated at any given time. But all three, work in concert in the event of some environmental change, which puts that gene in a vulnerable position. The gene being the red car put in the vulnerable position because the yellow car hit them. The environment changed for that person in that red car immediately. Now you've been hit by a car, now you got to have, let's keep going. Now you got to have insurance. Now you got to get the estimation. Now you got to find out how to get this car fixed. Oh, Lord, what's going on with this car? So you got to get the car fixed. Now with a car, well, I don't know about this car, but with most cars, if there's something, door hanging off, hood messed up, fender falling off, tire messed up, this car is probably a wash. It's probably, total. But before you can do the calculation, and determine what the estimate is going to be and adjust and everything, you got to know the year, the mileage, the model, the make. There's a lot of things need to be done to ensure that you give the customer, the human with these methylation issues, the right estimation of what should, the right cost of what's going to happen, what is needed to fix the problem. Can we fix the problem? Is this mutation permanent? Year, that's your age. Mileage, that's how much damage you have. Epigenetic damage. The model, black male, black female. The make, brown skin, dark skin, light skin. This is how I'm comparing this to a real world thing. Brown skin, dark skin, light skin is your melanin content, physical wear and tear, a lot or a little, damage from the accident. That could be that a gene is a gene has some type of radiation exposure, some kind of toxin, preservative exposure. She ate a lot of preservatives. Well, she ate out of a can a lot. She ate a lot of fatty foods.
Which is Which is why when you compare that, for example, two cars that came out from the same factory at the same time and have all of those things the same, epigenetics kind of accounts as to why twins are different. But I may be jumping ahead, but there's a lot of studies that show that.
You're right. Let me go back here. Oh, we were just on this, on this slide, and I had my slides out of order, but it's okay. So yeah, you have twin studies. So, you have identical twins and you look at them epigenetically, and there's slight differences in genes. Genomic, when they say genetically they are identical, they mean genomically they are identical. Yes. But epigenetically, no, they are not necessarily identical.
So they're spitting the same verse, but the way they rap it is a little bit different.
Is a little bit different. They could be spitting it in the same tonality, the same timing, but they have different accent.
Yep.
And so, everyone will be able to feel what they're saying. Like, oh, wow.
Y'all look the same.
Huh?
Y'all look the same.
Yeah. Like, but okay, wow. Like, you'll hear one say do it in a British accent, another one do it in a Southern accent. And you're like, I heard that before. I've heard this before, that type of thing. There's not much drift, but there is a difference. And so with the epigenetic genetic drivers, this just goes into more detail about physically what happens to the genes. So on the DNA double-stranded helix, you have a methyl group. You have a carbon atom with 3 hydrogen atoms, CH3, bound to the DNA, okay, the backbone of the DNA. And when you have enough of these bound to DNA and DNA, wraps around these histones, and you have different types of histones. Once it wraps around, this is called chromatin, once it starts to organize itself. And the chromatin organizes itself enough and condenses enough to make a chromosome. Okay. And so chromatin is, there's a lot of factors involved in keeping chromatin bound, wrapped tightly, and organized in a certain way. And I'll show you in a minute. And you might have seen a little bit, but I'll show you in a minute. So there's these epigenetic factors outside of this histone. And usually histones bind in an octamer fashion, meaning there are 8 of these little balls that are all, paired with each other into 4 groups of 2 apiece. And you have these histones, you have the tails, you have the regulation that's needed to keep them locked into place. When a gene needs to be activated, a lot of times something has to come take this methyl group off, that little piece of DNA. Remember, it's not looking like this. It's not all open and, oh yeah, we're just floating around. Otherwise it can't be protected, right? It needs to be all closed like this in the chromosome. So a certain area will open up. Opening physically, that's another thing I want to say. Opening up physically, the strand is not the same as opening up functionally. So it can be open, like this, but there's a methyl group there, meaning that this part of the gene from here all the way to whatever, it will not function. It will not copy itself, in other words. Until you take this methyl group off, that part of the gene is closed, functionally closed for business, right? And so that's what I'm trying to get at. And that's just giving you, and there's a link here as well, what is epigenetics, to go into even more detail about it. I didn't want to, go on too long. Oh, I wanted to ask if you had any questions or you wanted to say something about this.
No, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, these are all just proteins that, run in sequence that help you edit the track, basically. And it's important because, it's the conditions that can be done to invoke this process, which are important. And it relates directly to environment, environment of the cell, or, the receptors that these chromosomes have, or rather the proteins have, you know, two hormonal changes in your body. Some of this is just self-regulating. Other times it can happen because of stress and other things that are taking place. So, you know, it goes back to what we were using with the accident analogy. You know, if significant damage is done in the process of repair, there's the potentiality for permanent change.
Yes.
Because, you know, with these proteins that we're looking at, they have to be matched. You've got 4 different, you know, protein combinations which form DNA. So generally speaking, you got to match them a specific kind of way or it won't hold.
Right.
So you can accidentally, you know, create a mistype, or, you know, and this is maybe getting a little bit too much of the detail because this is kind of almost stepping into how CRISPR's works. But you know, the important thing is to know is that's pretty much the intermediary that changes that sequence and allows for what's there to be expressed differently or to not be expressed at all. So let's say you have a pattern for a mental disorder. You know, if you never get that green light to switch it on, even though it's there in the code, it'll never be brought up to the surface and express itself.
Right.
So a lot of mental disorders happen this way at a certain age once you've reached a particular expression of that, like, you know, bipolar disorder maybe, or I think they were studying schizophrenia. That's a popular one, you know, with regards to that.
That is very popular due to the how you inherit it. Thank you, Go Professor, for the super chat. He says, supporting the channel. I share this on my Twitter. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, schizophrenia is one. Depression is one.
Yep.
Manic depression. Those types of things. Yeah, schizophrenia, especially with twins, and anything with twins. This is why a lot of the Nazi scientists studied twins. They wanted to understand duality of the genetic code, and, you know, because that's the only instance where you really see 2 physical beings carrying the same genetic code, essentially, you know, virtually the same genetic code in 2 different bodies. So the experimentation opportunities are endless with that. And so that the ethics were not there, clearly, but scientific discovery, the discovery-based hypothesis. So there's 2 different types of science that you can conduct. There's discovery-based science, and there's hypothesis-based science. And a lot of theirs, unfortunately, was discovery-based. Most science right now is not discovery-based. It has to be hypothesized. You have to have an hypothesis before you go and spend millions of dollars to do experiments. But back then, people were more free, with less punishment, with less ethics to get things done. But now, I mean, it is sliding into CRISPR. I had my notes written down, like, talk about CRISPR, but I'm not gonna go into it. I just put like question marks on certain things. So it's funny how you brought that up, but you know, keeping the functionality of keeping certain genes functional is very important.
Well, the reason why I wanted to just make that quick note is because we still have a lot of people that question the validity of COVID.
Right.
So that's why I brought that up, so they can see how something could potentially be edited and how unlikely it is for certain sequences to be naturally occurring because of the nature of how it has to bind the proteins.
Right.
Yeah. That's all I was making.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I've seen that and I'm like, oh man, you know. Yeah, but these things are you know, the thing that gets me is that people say that certain things aren't real. I'm like, you know, the chips you eating is like somebody had to design them chips, not grow them chips. Yeah. Somebody designed those chips. Okay, they knew that, and they've known for a long time those chips cause problems. They cause effects on your genes. Why? Because they did the studies in other species, in model species, mice, for instance, to determine that there was effects on them genetically. That's how they know, you know, you're gonna have effect on you. They know when, they know it will happen, when it will happen, they know how it will happen. They, all these things, and here you are still eating your Lay's. I gotta have my Lay's, man. I gotta have
So
my Lay's.
excited.
I gotta have my Lay's and my RC Cola. Like, come on, man. You sound like Pookie. Like somebody said earlier, Pookie from New Jack City, man. Come on, man. Like that, and I see that, and I'm like, but you don't believe that COVID is real, for instance. But you believe in them. You believe in the stuff that you're eating, like you're consuming. That's real food. Like what if it's just tasty wheat? Like, come on. I'm sorry.
It's cheap. So, I mean, we go back to culture. They know
Yeah.
this. There's a whole correlation to that. A lot of us learned that in the HOTEP during our HOTEP training, but there's a lot of validity to that. People need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So on the left side, I mean, it's like, on the left side they have the octamer. This is excuse me, not octamer, but the methylation that's occurring as a protective mechanism. So they have M as a little tag, methylation tag, and you have the DNA squeezing around the histone, and the message, it's talking or it's trying to say something. It can't say anything because it's locked up. And this is, for the gene of interest, right? On the right side, there's a histone octamer. It's actually 8 parts. Each of these 4 little balls is represented by like another one behind it coming in. This being methylated following an unknown stimulus or change in gene regulation. So these little blue dots you see coming in here are the methylation patterns that they're showing. And this is done, I forget the university. It's hard to, okay. I think it's in Australia, this university where they were able to model what the proteins, where they do crystallography on different proteins at different times of this movement. And if you notice, it looks like arms here moving. And when the blue comes in, the methylation comes in, it has to touch here, 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 and then get tucked in. And they're all they're all forming into this, Megatron methylation, system that is the histones, that is the DNA double-stranded. You see the purple here, double-stranded DNA. This is DNA wrapped around really tight. And these balls are protein complexes. The light purple, these are protein complexes. The little blue and the little turquoise and yellow and things like that, those are chaperone proteins helping to keep this structure together. I know it looks kind of weird, it may look kind of nasty or whatnot, but this is what happens when, in methylation. This is modeled on a computer. They have the even with modeling with small molecules, when you're doing things in silico, you still have to, like, if you can magnify it, then you do that. If not, then you show it on a computer with just, like, for instance, a cartoon like this. But this must have been actual modeling of genes that were being methylated, and the effects of that on the histone complex that you see. Yeah, so that we have any sorry, you have any comments on that?
I just find it interesting how proteins behave a lot like how single cell organisms do.
Yes.
It's just funny. I mean, we go back to the whole metaphysical parallels between, as above, so too below. And then we get these patterns of these worlds, I guess, the further into microbiology you get, it's just interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's like, hey, dude, are you here? Yeah, all right, let's touch, man.
Right.
Come on, all right, okay. I can't. It's like they're blind. I can't see you.
But see, I wonder if our neurology looks a lot like this too. When they're building the synapses and creating those pathways and whatnot. Again, it's just more patterns of seeing the same thing on a different scale.
And see, this is sped up. It's sped up. Things are not. They don't. I think the initial lapse was definitely not this fast. Things are sped up to um, just for time, but you can see that they have to touch certain things in the because within the histones and nucleosome within the parts of DNA that are wrapped around, there are chaperone proteins on the DNA that have to that have a, what is it called, uh, like a cleft or a a space, like a protein space. And until you can do something in the next sequence, the next step in the sequence, they have to be they have to touch each other for a certain amount of time, exchange charge or something. And then, okay, I touch here, I touch here, I touch there. Are we all here? Yes. Okay. Combine,
Right.
activate.
Form Voltron.
Then.
I said form Voltron.
Yes, and see the main reason is, this is expected to be a permanent lockdown measure. Okay, so every step has to be taken properly to lock everything down. If they open this whole complex up again, maybe only this part right here opens again. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
the whole thing is not going to be open again. Like, oh no, we're not going through all them steps, all this touching and holding, grabbing, and no, we're not doing all that. Because see, these proteins, like the turquoise color, the yellow color, they have to go do something else somewhere else. They can't be around all the time. A different protein complex comes in to keep it locked. This is the protein complex needed to lock this down. And these proteins are not going to stay there forever. Otherwise, it would be your body would break down, because it would be a wasteful system. These proteins are not wedded to this complex. They are promiscuous, meaning they can float from complex to complex, assisting in them locking down and protecting themselves. The problem with the epigenetics of it and the methylation is they know that methylation is not all good, and it's due to the environment changing. I have yet to find a paper that says, yeah, the environment's changing. It's not a good thing, as it was 50 years ago, and we need to focus on changing this environment and getting things right if we want to be here successfully and healthy in the future.
Yeah, and maybe this is a funding thing, and people are trying to find ways to, I guess, profit off of this, and maybe the entry point into that is creating epigenetic changes in plants. You know what I'm saying? For the agricultural industry, or to assist in maybe treating certain illnesses or the creation of certain drugs to encourage different epigenetic changes and other things. Like I don't see a lot of research going into this the way you would think. And when you do, it seems to be more related to cloning.
Going into specifically the epigenetics of certain diseases is what you're asking. Like cancers, for instance, or anything? Or are you talking about psychological issues?
Yeah, like I don't see them really emphasizing research like this, as far as
You don't see it, huh? Sorry. Keep talking. What were you saying? What are you gonna say? You said what now?
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, there are more. I ran out of space on the screen.
Oh no, I'm saying that's fair. I just don't hear about it.
These published maybe 2014 to maybe 2019. I think this one's 2017. One of these is 2019. Might be this one. But yeah, these are all effects of stress, early and midlife stress on DNA methylation. That's DNA damage. Whenever you see DNA methylation, replace the word methylation with damage.
Got you.
It will make more sense.
Got you. So maybe I've been looking at it wrong.
No, it's here. They have it a lot.
Wow. So
Mm-hmm.
I got some work to do, taking a look at some of the stuff, because everything that came up, most of it was with behavioral science,
Right.
and I guess looking at people who've been traumatized from child abuse,
Yes.
and they've been sticking real heavy in that lane with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do a lot with stress because, and a lot of this funding is coming from military, um, Department of Defense, and even Homeland Security, National Security, like, because if your men are stressed out and it's causing genetic issues, they're looking down the line.
PTSD, because there could be some
Right.
potential lawsuit type potential for
Yes.
this.
I mean, there could be lawsuits. There could be, people. That's one of the questions I have in the description box. What is it saying? Can these changes in genetics be seen as unavoidable comorbidities and or potential targets for therapy in patients? So, an unavoidable comorbidity is something you can sue for. You can sue for. I have this comorbidity. I have methylation issues. If you're going for, I don't know, reparations,
I was
um,
gonna say that immediately after that.
I don't know, reparations, as ADOS, you could say that, I have a lot of epigenetic issues going on with me. And it's devastating. Honestly, I ain't even joking. It's devastating because I already know from the science that I have learned from these scientists that my children will have this, particularly if you are a man, because you only have one X chromosome.
Yep.
There is a disease. Peace to everybody coming in chat. My bad if I'm missing you. There was a disease called Vexus that just came out yesterday. That it just identified, I should say, yesterday. A new inflammatory disease discovered. Let me copy the link. I'll put it in the chat in a minute, but it says researchers discovered a new inflammatory disorder. Now, this could be due to epigenetic misregulation. It's called Vexus. It's Texas with a V, V as in violin. So VEXAS, shared by men with diverse symptoms. The study demonstrated a new genomic approach to identify and classify inflammatory and other diseases. 40% of men who have this mutation of the UBA1 gene are dead.
Wow.
40% of Vexus patients who the team studied have died since the study. The researchers hope that this new genomic strategy will help healthcare professionals improve disease assessments and treatments. So, yeah, the UBA gene is a gene that is responsible for ubiquitination. So, when a protein is ubiquitinated, it is tagged for degradation.
In other words, it's condemned to be destroyed.
Yes, condemned to the trash heap. And when you fail to tag trash, what happens if you don't take your trash out for a month at your house?
Yep, you get backlogs of problems.
Right. If the trash truck doesn't come, for 2 months, it's going to be a mess. And so, if it's not even tagged for degradation, you have accumulation of all these proteins that are functionally wrong. Maybe they don't have the right post-translational modifications. They're just sitting around and they can't be degraded. So they're taking up not only a lot of space molecularly, but you saw how those histones they had to touch each other to get closer and closer to each other to form that complex. Well, you'll have proteins in the cell that continue consistently touch these proteins, and they're like, what you doing here? Like, why are you here? Like, aren't you trash? Yeah, I'm trash. But I'm just sitting here, just chilling, man. Why are you here? You need to go, man. Ain't nobody wants you around here no more. Man. why everybody so mean to me, man? I'm just trash, man. I'm just trying to do my thing. Well, do your thing somewhere else. Nobody want, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what happens. And they call the police. This man, he won't get up off the stoop. He won't leave. Ain't nobody gonna come pick him up. Nope. Nobody can come pick him up, because that's usually what happens. Ubiquitin inhalation is used as a surveillance of the cell. When nobody comes up with the trash, you have backlog in every cell of your body.
Yeah, so
Involved in the inflammatory process. So that's how these men are dying. This just came out yesterday. They published it October 27th in New England Journal of Medicine.
Wow.
The article about it, explaining it, just came out yesterday. Wow. This is a potential, I'll put in here, it's nih.gov, but it's a potential, long-term health problem for men specifically. I'm looking at that like, wow, okay. So when I see that, and there's clearly some epigenetic changes that have occurred, some type of DNA damage that has occurred with that gene not to function. If that's its only function and it can't do that right, something's going on. So when you look at these studies and many others, there you start to see this a pattern. A lot of it is dealing with stress. A lot of it is also dealing with, yes, there are inherited psychological problems or environment induced, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. But yeah, that just came out. I just saw it this morning, like 10 o'clock. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. Like,
wow.
Yeah, it just adds more, more to it. And I'm looking like, okay, this is interesting. If you, like I said earlier, if you want to go and, put something up for reparations. I mean, you have Holocaust survivors where they were studied for a long time about their post-traumatic stress disorder.
And see, when you begin to change the parameters of what defines and constitutes as damage, that was kind of where I was going for, when I made mention of that. Because if we can demonstrate that the plantation has clearly had long-term effects that, and maybe they can even see that. Well, I don't know if causation and correlation would be the same with regards to that, but I mean, you can make a case for it. Like, how wouldn't that affect you? Especially when you can start tracing back to things like the baby farms that were going down and, what you experienced as far as that goes. And then the trauma that may have happened from folks who survived traumatic events and their descendants, you know what I'm saying? Like Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example. Like it gets pretty interesting, the way you can redefine those terms.
Yeah, that's why I want to, it gets interesting how you can redefine it, but it also, if you can back it up with study that is well-rounded. So that's why I have, different types of journals that are showing this, like not just the topic itself, but from different sources. That's important. From around the world, seeing the same phenomenon occur in different areas. That reproducibility factor is very important. I know that Dr. T.S. Johnson is doing some things he wants to develop. He's working for this institute that he wants to do, and I understand that, and that is very like, I applaud that. I'm like, okay, yes, I see it. And I really am glad that he's putting the articles there. He's showing the articles. He's showing, he's giving you what you need when you need to think about these things. And I feel like it's my duty to do the same in my field, and I'm doing that. The things I talk about here on my channel, they're crossing over is what I'm trying to say. They're crossing over into his world and what he's doing. It's a lot of this is about how we're treating each other.
Right. It reinforces the ritual. So, it's a good way of looking at all of this. And that's why I wanted to do this topic with you in particular, because of the impetus you put with your credentials and, a lot of the nuance you have, because this is literally your job.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we don't get a lot of access to that in the Black community. So again, shout out to you for taking the time out to even do this.
Yeah. It's a labor. I mean, a labor of love for me. I mean, I love looking up these things. I have these links. I have these, many other articles as well. I want to let everybody know in the bottom. We don't have to shut down right now. It's just this is my last slide. And I want to, I wanted to say thank you to the Nameless Protagonist for coming here. It was your idea. I was like, oh wow, somebody wants to talk about this. Yes. When I hear certain topics, like y'all don't realize how excited I am. I'm like, oh my God, I get to talk about this, and because I've been talking about these topics with other scientists, for a long time, and they're like, well, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Like we know people, like for instance, Dr. Powell, I know her personally. I called out another person earlier, Dr. Larissa Nan. I've met her on several occasions. Like I know some of the people in here, like people that do this work. You can email them, you can call them, talk to them. If they have their information available, and it's good to be able to talk to people who are not in the field. You get a different perspective. That's why I do it, and it's good for you all to learn from my side. To see what is current. These studies are not from 1940s and 50s. These are from probably no later than 3 or 4 years ago. Very recent, cutting edge, up to date studies. I'm not going to bring you something unless it calls for it in the discussion. I'm not going to bring something that's like 40, 50 years old unless it pertains to the discussion. Most of the work I do, if it's 5 years or older, we don't even show it.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of us get exposed to a lot of older information. And so we're not really privy to, a lot of the new developments that happen. And it sort of feedback loops into what you were talking about before, about your observation of folks not being involved in STEM and the long-term damage that causes us as a demographic, because we're not able to recognize opportunities that stem from that, let alone, producing people who could be involved in it.
Right. Right. I hope that everybody, you just, go back and look at this. I know there are people here. Let me stop sharing. I know there are people here who want to get, the PowerPoints and everything. And I promise you, I'm gonna get back to you. No, it's not my last live. Fitness Mom, what's going on? No, it's not my last live. I was just saying that this is, I'm sure I didn't say that, but I want people to understand that, I'm here to provide information for you. People have topics they want me to discuss. We come up here, we discuss them. I hope that you can get something out of it. I will send people the PowerPoints when they ask. And that's what I was saying. People who have emailed me, I will get back to you. My bad. I will. I swear I will. The election kind of like,
monkey wrench.
Yeah, it really did. And I was in the middle of analyzing data and trying to watch, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all these networks, and I was like, I'm done. Like I couldn't. I fell asleep. I was like, I cannot. Y'all messing around. So, in the midst of all this going on, we have to constantly think, and shout out to Mike B. He talks about policy a lot. He sticks it to policy. I have said on my channel that politics and science do go together. Always keep that in mind when you're reading these articles. Go to their acknowledgement section. Look at who funded the program, funded the project, and keep that in mind. Somebody had to sign something off. A lot of times it's Congress. A lot of times it's your congressmen and congresswomen who have to sign off on a lot of these projects that are done. Ask why they're doing the projects.
Well, remember CERN?
And it's a problem.
Remember CERN? CERN almost happened right there in Texas. Right there in Texas. And, I think they asked the question, will this help us find God? And I almost said yes. But, it took a simple statement like that, which prevented a profound project like that being built right there in Texas. And instead, it ended up going out to, what was it, Sweden?
Yeah, they have the Hadron Collider, and then they have something similar. The Fermi Lab is outside of Chicago, Illinois. So they have something that's a little similar in a different setting. I think on a much smaller scale. But yeah, you're right. Like they could have had it right there in the middle of the country, and which I mean, I'm not saying they don't still have something there. Wink, wink.
Right.
But because it's the pursuit of science, and that's the issue that we've talked about before as far as social dominance theory, the pursuit of science in at the cost of the ethics of it.
Well, shout out to cultural, well, not cultural, what was it called? God, what was it? Scientific Apartheid? I'm forgetting the name of this book.
Medical Apartheid.
Medical Apartheid. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Harriet Washington. Yeah, you're right. You had Dr. J. Marion Sims. You had a lot of people who did work. I keep calling him out because he's the father of gynecology. Like you tortured women. I'm not about to give you props for that. You tortured women that we know of. You could have tortured other people that we don't know that weren't on record. Men, children, whoever. On record, you put women who were property. That's just that a sadistic person. And so I look at that and I'm like, that was the I mean, not even him, but just we're going into medical apartheid, the whole medical industry at the time. And I'm just like, oh wow. Okay. Like this is crazy.
And I think people should pay attention. It was mentioned earlier in the chat too. Quantum computing is going to save so much time with a lot of figuring out these sequences, and that's one of the immediate uses that you'll see it. Maybe Dr. Anwar, could talk a little bit about that too, because I know they're looking at the potentiality of it being able to create solutions synthetically, to create compounds to help improve the use of medications. And I know that'll have a direct effect on how you want to treat things, and it may create artificial environments where instead of the lab mice, they may be able to create simulations of genetic code and synthesize what may occur, maybe to a certain degree. I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, in silico they do the we do that. Yeah, we do that. We have where is it? I was doing that earlier. Sorry. I was where is it? I'll just share the whole thing. What the hell? So Shango the Eternal mentioned a gene about a year ago, FOXP2, which is a gene in humans encoded by FOXP2, a protein encoded by FOXP2 gene, member of the fork-head box family. It's a transcription factor. Regulates expression by binding to DNA. It's expressed in the brain, heart, lungs, digestive system. It's a neurological gene. More importantly, it's involved in speech. Okay, so there was a polymorphism that occurred between Neanderthals and human beings, Homo sapiens. So if you want to, look up some things about FOXP2, there's a UCSC, University of California, Santa Cruz Genomics Institute genome browser. I use this for everything. You can do in silico PCR. You can design your own PCR primers. This is how I designed primers Monday. When I was I needed primers that I have primers that are human, but I have cells that are mouse from a mouse. Mouse cells. I can't use human primers on a mouse cell because the sequences don't line up. Okay, so the human primers were for exon 2, but I need to look at exon 3 in the mice. So even if they were conserved, meaning they were the same in human and mice, it's a different exon, it won't work. You know, I was like, damn it. So I had to try to design it. So for instance, like FOXP2, let's say I want to do FOXP2. All right. You know, we can design this in real time. We can design this, you know, in silico. Do it all the time. It's nothing. FOXP2, there it is. Okay, so then you come down. My favorite website, NCBI, go to gene, click on gene, and there's human, number 1, right? I got, let's say I have human cells. Oh, here we go, human.
And they just catalog all of this. Well, I guess that's what the Human Genome Project did.
That's the Human Genome Project. So if we go back, you'll see where they'll have, you know, they have human. This is why I clicked on chromosome 7. Mouse, musculus, house mouse, chromosome 6. It's a different chromosome. So the primers will be different, right? This is the alias. So this is the other. FOXP2 is all the way down. But they have another name. They have different names for the same gene. This is the long name for the gene in the mice. CAG16, DOKIST7. These are the other CAGH44. These are different names. Like when you're writing your paper, you can use these different names and then put a footnote for FOXP2 to hide what you're doing from your competitors. For instance, okay, the rat and the mouse are different. Mouse chromosome 6, rat chromosome 4. Zebrafish, you know, we got a zebra finch, like that little bird.
Chimpanzees and horses.
Yeah, they have horse, they have a clawed frog, a cow, chicken, dog, cat, pig, piranha, fruit-eating bat. This one's popular right now. The Jamaican fruit-eating bat. Anything with bats is popular right now because
of COVID.
Right, horseshoe bat, very popular right now. They don't have anything for this bat, but the horseshoe bat is really popular. At some point, the primates will become popular again. I don't know. Maybe not, but primates are expensive. That's why people don't really like them. But I can click this FASTA. Like this gives you everything about the gene. It tells you the sequence alignment. It tells you where it sits. It gives you the number on the genome. This is a number. The position, I mean the location on the gene on chromosome 7. So it's between this position and that position, and it sits right there. Okay. Then you have all these different builds, like with computers. You have these different builds or different sequences that you can look at and click on, and you have all kinds of like references to that. I'm gonna click on FASTA and I'll see what I get from the FASTA sequence. So this is the sequence of the gene.
So those are all the proteins and the combinations that make it.
This is nucleotides.
Okay.
This is, see at the top it says primary assembly, chromosome 7. It says reference sequence NC nucleotide chromosome 0000007.14, you know, whatever that is. And so you know it's human, chromosome 7. This is the primary assembly. So what I do is, I know, just don't select that much because you know you see this thing ain't moved right on the side. It's like sitting there chilling. So then I copy that and I'll go to primer 3. It's a website I can use. And I'll hold that open and I'll go to Genome Browser. A lot of foxes. Just click that. Human. Let's see what I get. So this is the gene opened up. Let's see. The gene is opened. Yeah. Oh, here it is. So this is showing the gene. Now, if you click on this little part right here, you can see how FOXP2 is expressed in different tissues. It already has a catalog for you.
It lines it up. Wow.
So it's every tissue you can think of, even whole blood. There's nothing really there, but that's not surprising. So it has your expression. It's very high in the colon, these two. And I always go to prostate, but it's nothing there really. Breast, nothing really there. Brain, it's low until you get to, for some reason, bladder, colon. I don't know. To be a language gene, there's a language
odd, right?
First identified for language. That's why. And so what I would do with that sequence that I copied, just to make it brief, is I could open another window for NCBI, and then I'd go down to, where is it? Gene. I would click gene, and then put FOXP2 and go to blast. It takes forever to load. That's why I'm not clicking it, but I can't stand it. But click blast. I'll blast the sequence that I selected and try to find primers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because it's like I may not have selected an area where primers are normally selected from, right? So I have to find the right area, and that's why it's best to select this whole thing all the way down. And they have this option here to pick primers. I never use this because it never picks them right for me.
So it just randomly finds a patch and throws it out there.
Yeah, so that's one way you can do it. Another way, because all the papers that are published nowadays, that's the hard way to do it. And that's the way I usually do it if it's like a gene I'm not familiar with. But another way you can do it if you want to pick primers is go to the gene again, and then come down where it says literature. Look at all the papers for one gene.
Wow.
Okay, so
it's like you trying to solve for pi with some of this stuff.
Right.
God damn.
We call it the FOXP2. It gives you a nice little map of how many people have published and all this stuff. It has gone up significantly. In 93 there was nothing, and then it just goes up. So what I want to do is make sure that the paper I'm looking for has something that I can use for primers. If I want protein, then I'll just type in Western blot or something. So here it is. Here's something that might be, they have PCR in the abstract. So I could probably use this. They're saying FOXP2 promotes tumor proliferation and metastasis. It targets GRP78 and triple negative breast cancer. Triple negative breast cancer is very, really bad. Okay, very bad. And so sometimes they do this where I hate it, where they're where's the rest of the freaking article? They don't give it to me. And so what I would do is search the PMID number that they have right here. I would go back and only search this PMID number, and then I would get the full text of this article, copy and paste their primers out of their paper.
So this is the same thing coders do when they're looking to do a routine algorithm. Instead of typing it all out longhand, you can just take these little pre-recorded things and then just change the variables you're looking for. So it's just pre-written primers that somebody already took the time to do if you don't feel like doing it yourself.
Yeah, if I want to do it myself, then I'll order a set of primers that has this PMID number on the tube. And the primers that I make myself, I literally just put me on the primer tube.
So people get their little street cred for doing it?
No, I won't get no, I won't get street cred. I know the difference between the ones I designed from scratch
Oh, ones you
and the
borrowed from
ones
some.
they design. And what I'll do is, let's say their primers come up and it's 150 base pairs. That means it's gonna show up on the bottom of the gel because very small pieces of DNA they run through the gel fast. How big piece of DNA can't run that fast, so they end up at the top of the gel. So the small pieces of DNA are at the bottom, 150 base pairs, which is not a lot that you're looking for. And that's their primers from this paper. I need to design primers. Once I find out what their primer size is, I need to design primers no more than 150 base pairs. That's when the work comes in, where I have to design them myself.
Gotcha.
And I go through that sequence. And then when I go through that sequence, I can match it to their sequence of their primer. I match their sequence when I find it in their paper to the sequence that we saw earlier on the screen.
Mhm.
And where does it show up? All I do is do Control F and find a sequence. That's it. Find a sequence. Where does their sequence match up to the sequence for the gene itself?
I did a video talking about culture in what I call the Library of Babel. I think you'd like that video because I described the way the library works is pretty much what your job is every day, which is pretty funny actually.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's labor of love and everything. And I'm like, I have patients. I have to, like in this paper, they have patients and things and cells that they're trying to figure out what's going on with them. But once I get that, it is a library. That's exactly what it is. NCBI, they have the library. Primer 3, UCSC, these are libraries. If I put a primer sequence here as the 5' 3' forward primer, and the right primer 5' 3' reverse primer strand, and I click pick primers, it'll give me a sequence. It'll give me tons of primer pairs. It'll tell me what the size is. It'll tell me what the temperature I should use on my PCR machine. It'll tell me everything. That's called in silico PCR. That means you didn't do any work. You didn't do no work on the bench. You didn't grow no cells. You didn't do nothing. You just working on the computer. And I mean, it says that the gene class of FOXP2 is coding. I think that's funny. But the protein coding gene, all it does is code. And it says it's important for neural mechanisms mediating the development of speech and language. That was the first function it was found to do. That's not the only function. That's what they're starting to see. So what I do know from researching this earlier today, FOXP2 has a lower expression in aggressive breast cancer. And many cancers actually, but in breast cancer specifically, it's decreased, it's suppressed, possibly methylated. And when
they can use that as an indicator to detection,
right? So when you have normal breast cancer, FOXP2 is very high, and it just drops off when cancer develops. So that is one, they're trying to use it as a biomarker in that paper. And I think that's what it's being used for. We use FOXA2. FOXA2 is, I know they sound similar, but FOXP2 is involved with as a determinant for breast cancer metastasis, for instance. When it's low, breast cancer metastasis is really bad, right? Your survival is really bad. Prognosis is bad. FOXA2 only works in certain cells, and it is a indicator that your cells have become neuroendocrine. They're able to process function. They're able to function like neurons. Okay. I know it seems similar because it says neural mechanisms, but these are normally cells that will be responding to hormones. Now they don't respond to hormones that well.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because that goes right back to epigenetics again.
Right.
About the receptors there. That's interesting.
Yeah. And so I work with receptors. I work mostly androgen receptor. I used to work with estrogen receptor, but now I work primarily with androgen receptor. With metabolism, tumor metabolism is really big right now. I was talking to VGS one day about how the regenerative ability of the liver is very important to try to understand. It's the only organ that, can consistently regenerate itself at any point. And so that's one thing we're looking at and trying to develop better markers for patients and treatments that are less invasive, less harmful, less painful to the patients. We want to improve quality of life. And so that's what we're working on right now. And so like there's epigenetics all in there because number one, these are aging patients. Number two, if they're aging patients, clearly their liver has aged.
Right.
So their liver has reduced ability to regenerate itself. It can't regenerate as much as it used to. So we're looking at those mechanisms, trying to find out why are these patients not responding to these drugs. What is it about the liver that makes it not a good filter anymore? The aging, what is happening there? We're just asking questions, but hopefully we'll be able to continue these experiments on. But yeah, these in silico experiments are one, hella expensive to do. I try to do them for free, as you just saw me try to do. Just do looking at the cell. There's a lot of things you can do as far as predict methylation, predict what does a gene look like if it's methylated? Where is the gene methylated? Where is the DNA methylated? Like specific location on the DNA. It will show you. This is where the DNA is methylated in humans. This is where DNA is methylated in mice. It will tell you. I don't have the sequence, immediately in front of me, but there are many websites that, just like UCSC, they will tell you. So it's things are out there. It's a matter of us. I want us to, know more of us to know of these things, know of these resources. Maybe I should have like a training or something because some people were emailing me about they were using the string database to print out some of the proteins. And there was a physician that gave them information about one of their relatives. There were certain proteins on the paper. They put typed the proteins into the string database because they saw me talking about it with Salchi that other day. And, they were like, I went and showed it to the doctor and he was like, I didn't even know these proteins interacted like this.
Wow. Yeah, folks don't know.
No, the doctor's saying like, I didn't know. I was like, how are you giving out drugs? The hell? Like, how you don't know that? And they were like, yeah, these proteins interact this way. And they said, I didn't even say nothing about you. I was just telling him like, I've learned something and this is how these proteins interact. And this is a negative connection right here. This should not happen right here. And the reason why this line is this color is because, this protein inhibits this protein and all. I was like, wow. I was like, go with it then. Like,
Wow.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. The position was like, now they have to rethink their therapy methods and stuff.
Because they could be setting folks up.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Not knowing that this technology is out here. And it's not like it's because they said that the doctor was like, what do you mean? Where's your proof? And he's like, I just showed him all the evidence.
Wow.
Because some of those things, like you can click on the protein, you can click on the interaction, the little line between the two proteins, and you get like a list of references. Go to the references, they got, the data is right there. They got data in mice, some of them have patient data. Like this is patient data.
Right.
Wow. Maybe cancer, maybe lung cancer, maybe brain issues, heart issues. And my auntie got a heart issue. Why have you not read this paper with a heart issue, with a cardiovascular disease in the patients that are my aunt's age? Why you haven't read this?
I mean, once they get out of med school, it's like,
wow.
Once they get out of med school, I mean, what do you expect folks to do? I mean, it's kind of like the issue I have with diet. You go to a lot of these physicians and, they're not updating their information on what folks are learning, real time. And there's a lot of information that's been aggregated, and it should be kind of supplemented, because just talking about protein synthesis and learning how hormones interact with that and how your diet influences these things and controlling your macros and then different methods that you can use to train and recover. There's a lot of things that, I mean, if you don't have a reason to get into that, why would you?
That's true.
And then, the bigger question becomes like, okay, well, could food substitute and create a similar response or change in hormones that you would use a drug to do?
Of course.
So like this is getting into the whole holistic and homeopathic treatment, and
Right.
you look at the chemical reactions with certain herbs, which I think is something that is wide open for us to talk about here, and how we can use that as a form of supplementary medication, so that I mean, I guess when we're talking about the use of drugs and whatnot, certain things can help chronic situations, but maybe there are things that we can use in their natural form that prevent it from accelerating to that pace, or keeping certain things that are within our bodies running well,
Right.
so that we don't have to have so many interventions. What I mean? Going back to what we were talking about with epigenetics, because who knows, a lot of that stuff, it sounds like some of it could be reversed potentially.
Yes, that was one thing that there was a study where certain enzymes called cathepsins. So cathepsins are reactive enzymes that they're very active enzymes that break down the extracellular matrix. So you need a matrix that is a protective barrier between tissues, so between organs, for instance. And so you needed that extracellular matrix, which is composed of a lot of different enzymes, a lot of different proteins, and cathepsins break that extracellular matrix down. When the extracellular matrix is broken down to a certain point, it's like if you're wearing a jacket and it's catching on fire. After a while, it's gonna be gone. It's gonna disintegrate, right? For instance, the fire it's not going to hurt you. The fire is only there to burn that jacket off. After a few seconds, that jacket is burned up to a crisp. You ain't even wearing nothing but rags.
Right.
So, if you're wearing that jacket, now it is burned, now you're exposed. The difference is tumors don't operate like normal cells. Normal cells would think, I'm exposed, I need help. Tumor cells like, deuces, I'm out. Like, I'm out. I'm gone. They're like the criminals of the body. Okay. They weren't always criminals. They weren't baby tumors. They were normal cells that got turned around, went the wrong way, went down the wrong alley. And now, they've been jumped in and they transformed and they come back as Debo. Okay.
Right.
And they come back as a gang member, right? They come back doing something they ain't supposed to be doing. And so that's what you're dealing with. And they're like, shoot, I'm out. Like, I'm gone. And they steal a car and drive off. Okay. It's like, that's pretty much meaning they get into your bloodstream and they're gone. Then you won't find them. You'll never find them. Right. And so this is what happens with cathepsins. Cathepsins allow that to happen. They spark the match and let that happen. They're the type of enzymes that can be detected in the blood. They can be detected in the plasma, things like that, in certain tissues. And so there was a study done where they looked at the cathepsins and they found that if you give muscadine grape skin extract from muscadine grapes, the natural remedy, the active component of muscadine grape skin extract, just the skin of the grape. I remember we would get the grapes and we got the powder, and powder had a different effect than taking the grapes, drying them in the microwave, crushing them down with the mortar and pestle. Yes, we did this, crushing it down with the mortar and pestle, adding alcohol or DMSO to that to dissolve any of the active ingredients off of it, and then giving that to the cells. So giving that extract to the cells or giving the powder to the cells, there's a difference in methylation. We can actually demethylate certain genes, such as the genes that would push down some of these cathepsins that would take their place. MMPs, for instance, metalloprotease what is it, proteases, I forget the other M, but these are other types of enzymes that aren't as aggressive as cathepsins. They still are enzymes, so they still degrade something, but they don't do as much damage as a cathepsin does. And these cathepsins are, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, all the way to M, several types of them. They come in a gang, literally, like they're always grouped together in a clump. And you're like, what the hell is it? What's going on? MMPs don't work that way. They don't function that way. They work one-on-one. They do their thing and they leave. So we found that there was decreased methylation of MMPs when we gave this muscadine graveskin extract. And when that occurred, you had a reduction of the cathepsin activity, not the expression of the gene, activity, meaning the protein enzyme ability to do its job.
Wow.
There was less enzyme there. There was less activity of the enzyme that was left over. And so that's just one example. There are many studies on curcumin. There are studies on ginger. There's studies on ECGC. There's a lot of different studies. I mean, vitamin C, got a lot. The problem is like you can't make money off that.
Right.
These are things people can do at home. And ironically, most people that study them come from countries where those natural remedies are widely available. They come here, they're like, why am I studying something that I have at home? We have that for our people, but in America, drugs,
Right. Which, you'd be surprised. Well, I guess maybe this feeds back into the profit motive. Generally our thinking would be, all right, well, less people in the healthcare system, the more money can be spent elsewhere on productivity. But I guess we see it differently. But I don't think that'd be a reason why, our demographic should be discouraged from that. I think this is feeding back into ways we can solve a lot of our problems, because at the end of the day, we're looking at environment. And one of the most direct interfaces we have physically with our environment is the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat.
Absolutely. That's it.
So that right there in and of itself also seems to be one of the leading causes of death for us.
That's it.
So we're full circle back again as to why this is something you need to invest in anyway, because when you can address your health on that level, you can begin to alleviate damage that you're taking and pressure that you're taking in certain areas. And you may be able to be more receptive towards reversing a lot of the damage that you may have gone through epigenetically through your environment and upbringing. A lot of psychological problems can be dealt with via therapy. But if you're eating right, you're sleeping well, and you've got a reasonable living space that's not going to be full of triggers and distractions, you can be better receptive to therapy methods. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are all things that can be done to improve your condition. And if you make it a conscious ritual for that, you generally are able to begin solving your own problems with regards to that. This is fixable. Unlike, from what we know, you can't change your verse, but you can change the way you deliver it. So why not have proper delivery?
Yeah, you're right. And that's a good way to end it today because, as far as solutions, it is reversible. I don't want people to think that it's not. It's just that certain genes are not reversible at this time.
Right.
That we know of, the method perhaps has not been developed. Maybe the Black child that is going to go into STEM is not born yet, and so I just, I want to push our kids into STEM.
Hint.
But yeah, that's what I always say. Like, oh, maybe the Black man, he didn't come around to invent that yet. Oh well, I'll just wait. That type of thing. But I feel that way about a lot of these concepts, and I just hope that everyone listens to the playback. I thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, of course, Nameless, for being here. We'll have to talk about this another time.
Absolutely.
But I enjoyed this. Is great. I don't get this opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff.
We gotta let you flex on them so they can, get involved, because
Yeah.
it's science. I think probably the biggest gift to it all is realizing how it applies to your everyday life. Because if you don't take control of this information, somebody or something else will. And I think that's really the message I have with regards for this at the end of the day. Ritual you don't consciously control will subconsciously control you.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. This is something that, and it's not just this topic, but it's the way that we're presenting this topic, and I presented today um, in a more worldly fashion, or public fashion, just to introduce the topic. And if we go into more detail, then of course I can go into more detail as we go. But I had to think of my audience and how things need to be taken step by step. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The ritual, if you don't get a hold of it, it will take over. That ritual becomes your life. Then it becomes you, your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want it to get to that point. It's just like the genes, it locked in. And not having the right molecule, the right atom there in the right concentration to unlock the door and let those genes free. For instance, some genes probably do need to be locked up, but I'm just saying. But I'm really saying seriously, some genes that we cut out, they don't need to be turned on. This is why we turn them off, and do our studies. But understanding like how these three concepts all flow together, hopefully opens your mind. It should open your mind up to other things that could be flowing together. I'm hopefully have more time to talk about this. I was trying to see, I might just catch the end of it, but Dr. Johnson has a live on, so I'll probably catch his live real quick.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
we have left. But thank you so much. Do you have any final words before I shut this down?
Nope. Just whenever you want to get on this again, like maybe we can do a combo and revisit social dominance theory again, and kind of tie some of what we talked about to it and link it to current events. That could be a thing, sometime.
Definitely.
Whenever you're free again. But I just want these terms to kind of get out there to the greater manosphere, so we can kind of upgrade our lexicon and take advantage of the experts we have here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to seeing more on your channel. Anyone in the chat who has a channel, who has content, please post your links. Nameless, if you have anything you want to post in the chat, please do so, or in the comment section. Anytime, of course, is always welcome. That'll be it for me, y'all. I don't have anything else to say on this topic. I'm just excited. I'm just excited to have the conversation, but I'm gonna I gotta go analyze some data right now. Oh, bummer. But I'm glad I had this conversation to come up here and talk to you. So I'm gonna holler at y'all later. Y'all be good tonight. Hopefully they'll know who the president is before the weekend, and don't get too stressed out about it, I guess.
And be ready for any option.
It's either senior citizen or senior citizen. So, we'll go from there. Yeah, exactly. Ready for any option. Anything that happens, you should be.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll talk to y'all later. Y'all have a good evening. And oh yeah, hit them links if you haven't already. Hit them links. And I'll holler at y'all later. Peace.
Os.